Chapter 9:12. Qin Yining said politely, "Thank you for your trouble, Magistrate Liu. Wang Fei is too polite. This lowly official's duty." Magistrate Liu moved forward and took out a pulse pillow. He half knelt next to the heated Kang by the window and carefully checked Pang Xiao's pulse. He placed 3 fingers on the ruler. After examining his hands with great concentration, he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Although Prince Zhongxian's body had old injuries, he had clearly been carefully nursed back to health. Now, he was full of energy and vigor. He was a man who was almost 50 years old, but his body was comparable to a youth in his early 20s. How could he faint? Then there was only one reason for fainting, and that was that Wang Yi wanted to faint. Magistrate Liu was skilled in medicine, but there were countless skilled people in the Imperial Academy of Medicine. He had been in the Imperial Academy of Medicine for many years. To be able to reach the position of magistrate of the Imperial Academy of Medicine, he relied not only on his medical skills, but also on his smooth and sly conduct. His Highness has overworked himself. Deputy Hospital Head Liu probed implicitly. Pang Xiao nodded with a slight smile and said weakly, "There was heavy snow on the road back to the capital. The road was difficult to travel. This king was anxious to return home, so he had to eat and sleep in the open on the road." Magistrate Liu immediately nodded, "That's right." Wang Yi's old injuries flared up when he encountered the extremely cold weather and the bumpy road. However, this isn't a major cause. If he properly nursed himself back to health, it would take at least 3 to 5 days, and at most 3 to 5 months to get better. Qin Yining almost laughed when he heard this. Magistrate Liu was truly a wonderful person. The difference between 3 to 5 days and 3 to 5 months was great. There were many things that could be done. These words gave Pang Xiao face, "Could deal with your majesty," and also sold Pang Xiao's favor. It wouldn't infuriate the emperor and implicate him, and Pang Xiao definitely wouldn't expose him. It was truly a win-win situation. Many thanks to Magistrate Liu. Please go outside and write a prescription. Qin Yining wiped his tears and instructed Ji Yun to prepare a brush and ink. He also gave Chief Deputy Liu a big red envelope. Deputy Chief Liu accepted it with a smile. He gave a few more words of advice before leaving the prince's residence to report back to the palace. Seeing that he had left, Pang Xiao lay on the bed for a while longer. Then she jumped up and walked briskly to the door to take a look. She turned around and pulled Qin Yining's hand to sit on the heated Kang bed. "It's cold outside. Look at how cold your hands are. Are they frozen?" "Not bad." Qin Yining smiled and sat next to Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao looked at her red and swollen eyes and said, "Don't use such thick ginger juice next time. What if it's bad for your eyes?" "It's fine. I didn't use my sleeve to wipe my eyes. I was afraid that if I cried, it wouldn't be real enough and people would see through me. Wouldn't all my efforts be in vain?" Pang Xiao sighed and said, "When my sister Yi frowns, my heart clenches for a long time. Making you cry is worse than being stabbed with a knife." His large hand pulled Qin Yining into his embrace and kissed her forehead lovingly. "In the future, when everything is over, I definitely won't let you cry." Qin Yining couldn't help but smile, but the corners of her eyes were a bit moist. Perhaps the ginger juice on her sleeve was too strong. "All right, I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm unhappy. It's not something you can control. You don't know how many people envy me for being able to marry such a great hero like you. You understand me, love me, respect me, and give me enough space to display my abilities. This is something that many men can't do for their wives. I'm especially satisfied to be with you, so you really don't have to feel any psychological burden." "Sister Yi." Pang Xiao's throat was dry for a moment. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down. After a long time, he smiled and said, "All right, you're my wife. We'll be in the same boat through thick and thin. No matter how many problems there are in the future, we'll solve them together. Although the situation is tense now, there will be a day when I can let you live a peaceful and comfortable life. Let's first suffer before the sweetness." "That's right. Let's first suffer before the sweetness. There's a lifetime of happiness waiting for us to enjoy." Qin Yining smiled and leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder. After some thought, She recounted how she was offended by Duke Chang's ninth young master, how she talked to Duke Chang, and how she beat him with a plank before sending him back. Pang Xiao said in shock, "So it's true? When my men were in the city looking for information, they found out about this. However, I thought that the rumors outside might not be true. Our family has always been at the center of the storm, so it's normal for people to spread rumors behind our backs. I didn't expect it to be true." Qin Yining raised her eyebrows. "Did I spoil your plans by doing this?" "Of course not." Pang Xiao touched her face and said with a smile, "You did very well. If I was here, I'm afraid I would beat him even harder." At the end, the coldness in Pang Xiao's eyes could not be concealed. Shang Jihua dared to flirt with his wife. It was already a blessing from the heavens that Shang Jihua's life was not taken. Qin Yining leaned close to her ear and told Pang Xiao his plan in detail. Pang Xiao blinked. She thought about how she cooperated with Qin Yining today and the reactions of the people in the city. Then she thought about Qin Yining's arrangements. She could not help but smile dotingly and joyfully. She pinched the tip of her nose with her fingers. "You naughty girl. Now someone is going to cry because of your tricks. Didn't I do it for you? If you don't like it, I don't have to continue." Qin Yining pretended to be proud as she said. Pang Xiao loved this look of hers. He hugged her waist and laughed. "How could I bear to do that? All right, we'll do as you say. We've had a hard time eating and sleeping in the open all the way back to the capital. During this time, I'll claim that I'm sick. Let's have a good rest at home." He leaned close to Qin Yining's ear and whispered, "Let's have a few days of shamelessness." Originally, the topic was very serious. Who would have thought that Pang Xiao would change it in the end? Qin Yining's ears turned red. She punched his chest unhappily. "You lecher. Why didn't I find out earlier that you were like this?" Pang Xiao grabbed her soft hand and rubbed the back of her hand with his thumb. "Who said that? When we first met, I acted like a hooligan. Have you forgotten?" Qin Yining couldn't help but blush when she recalled how this guy chased after her shirtless in the military camp and even dared to say that she was his woman. However, they were almost an old married couple now. Thinking back to those days, although there were times when they were embarrassed, most of them were warm and sweet. Pang Xiao saw Qin Yining's bashful appearance and his heart was already racing. He pulled her hand and coaxed her to talk. At this time, Li Chitian was in the imperial study listening to Deputy Chief Liu's report with a gloomy expression. "You mean to say that Prince Zhongshiren's old illness really has relapsed?" Deputy Chief Liu was nervous. However, based on his judgment and understanding of Your Majesty, his words would definitely pass. Therefore, Deputy Chief Liu calmly nodded and said, "Replying to Your Majesty, that is indeed the case. Prince Zhongshiren has many large and small injuries on his body. When he returned to the capital this time, he was caught up in the heavy snow. The weather was cold and the ground was frozen. The cold penetrated his bones and his old injuries relapsed." When Li Chitian heard this, his heart inexplicably felt much better. He slowly nodded and said, "We will leave Prince Zhongshiren's health to you. You must do your best." Deputy Chief Liu lowered his head and respectfully said yes. Although he could vaguely sense that Your Majesty's words were unusual, he didn't want to get involved in these matters. He only pretended not to understand. Li Chitian casually waved his hand. Deputy Chief Liu hurriedly bowed and withdrew. Li Chitian's expression was gloomy. He crossed his legs and leaned against the arm of the Polonia wooden chair. His fingertips tapped his knees in a neither fast nor slow manner. When Pang Xiao returned to the capital today, everything that had happened flashed through his mind. In the end, Li Chitian could conclude that he had long planned this. He had used the people's public opinion to force him to be a wise ruler and not punish a meritorious official. Today, he had left the palace to welcome Pang Xiao. If he didn't go, it would prove that he mistreated a meritorious official. If he went, it would instead prove that Pang Xiao was a meritorious official. Pang Xiao's actions in the south were indeed beneficial to the court, but who could say that Pang Xiao's actions were not for his own sake? For example, when Pang Xiao had used the south to threaten him, he had no choice but to give up on the idea of killing Qin Yining. However, No one else knew about these secret confrontations. The officials didn't know, and the people didn't know. Li Chitian had rarely suffered losses. Now that he thought about it carefully, most of the losses he had suffered were related to Pang Xiao. However, this time, it seemed that he would have to swallow this loss. Li Chitian tightly pursed his lips, but his eyes narrowed due to the high-speed operation of his brain. Pang Xiao and Qin Yining really did spend a few days shamelessly at home. Although they didn't go out to play, their living conditions weren't much different from when they first went to the Lu family. The two read books together, or discussed what to do next. When they had nothing to do, they would casually play a game. In the end, there was even a bet to be made. After hearing Your Majesty's orders, Deputy Chief Liu would come to the Fu the next day to take the pulse. The records on the pulse were exactly as Pang Xiao had shown. It had to be said that Deputy Chief Liu was really a smooth and sly person. This way, he could report on his own, not implicate his family, and not offend anyone. As a result, time quickly passed and it was the day of the court assembly. As usual, Pang Xiao claimed that he was sick and couldn't go to court. However, at the court assembly, something happened that shocked the officials. The Duke of Changguo, Shongchuan, came out of his office and knelt to impeach Prince Zhongshiren. Your Majesty, when Prince Zhongshiren returned to the capital, he gathered thousands of people and almost caused chaos in the city. The military department of the 5 cities had no choice but to send more people. As a result, there were many empty patrols in the city. If something big happened because of this, wouldn't people laugh at the security of the capital? As an important official in the court, Prince Zhongshiren is deeply trusted by Your Majesty. Acting so recklessly and disrupting the order of the capital is already a heinous crime. When Your Majesty personally came out of the palace to welcome him, he still lost his composure in front of the emperor. This is simply disrespectful. Prince Zhongshiren is an important official and should be an example for the other officials. His actions are truly unforgivable. Your Majesty, please punish him for a serious crime. The Duke of Changguo, Shongchuan, was an old official from BG. He had always been low-key and wouldn't cause trouble. He was famous for being an easygoing person. However, today, he stood out to impeach Pang Xiao. This really surprised all the civil and military officials in the court. However, when they thought of the rumors flying around the city a few days ago, some people said that Pang Xiao and the Duke of Changguo were irreconcilable enemies. Chapter 9:13. Li Chitian's face was as calm as water, not saying anything. However, Duke Chang had clearly come prepared. Pang Xiao had become a despicable person in his words. However, when Chang Guogong impeached Pang Xiao, the content of his impeachment was nothing serious. Even if he was convicted, he could turn a blind eye to it. Obviously, it was not as shocking as the 10 major crimes that Li Chitian fabricated when he came prepared. Just as Duke Chang spoke, an imperial censor came out. Ban Xing bowed and added with righteous indignation. Your Majesty, Prince Zhongshiren was not only arrogant and disrupted the order of the capital. This official learned that it was already late at night when Prince Zhongshiren's consort returned to the capital. She did not observe the curfew and forced the city gate officials to open the city gates to let her in. Prince Zhongshiren's consort relied on nothing more than Prince Zhongshiren. For a woman to be so arrogant, it can be seen how Prince Zhongshiren normally is. When one person spoke, many imperial censors immediately came out to echo. For a moment, the imperial court was in chaos. Everyone was filled with anger, full of righteous indignation, as if Pang Xiao had committed the most heinous crime of raping and pillaging. Li Chitian's forehead was already vaguely bulging with veins. However, under the imperial court, according to etiquette, the officials could not raise their heads to look directly at the emperor's face. Therefore, these people continued to impeach without understanding. Li Chitian gritted his teeth in hatred. Of all the times to impeach, they chose this time to impeach. Right now, the public opinion in the capital was flourishing. Could he punish Pang Xiao? If he punished her, wouldn't it give people a reason to criticize him and make people think that he, the Son of Heaven, treated a meritorious official harshly? However, if he didn't punish her, first, there was such a good opportunity in front of him. Second, it was equivalent to indirectly exonerating Pang Xiao. In the future, if he wanted to use these reasons to impeach Pang Xiao, it would be slapping his own face. No matter how he thought about it, he was the one who was at a disadvantage. He didn't have a loyal subject who could understand his intentions. What was the point of having these things that were only pleasing to the eye but not to the eye? Li Chitian waited for Minister Du to finish speaking before he suppressed his anger and said coldly, "This matter needs to be investigated." Xiong Jinshui was standing closest to the emperor, so he naturally saw Li Chitian's twitching mouth and the bulging blue veins on his forehead. Fearing that Your Majesty would be affected by the dragon power, Xiong Jinshui hurriedly stepped forward and shouted while the officials were still in shock at the emperor's reaction. "Submit a memorial if you have one, withdraw if you don't." This meant that the emperor's pending investigation was enough to end the impeachment. Li Chitian's reaction was out of everyone's expectations, but no one dared to say anything at this time. Chang Guogong could only tactfully retreat for the time being. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao soon heard about what happened in the imperial court. "Your Majesty must be in a bad mood right now." "That's right. He has long wanted to punish me for my crimes, but he has never succeeded. Earlier, when he ordered people to impeach me, the old officials of Biji, represented by Chang Guogong, all held a wait-and-see attitude. Now that public opinion is at its peak, it's the most inappropriate time to impeach me. Yet, it happened here." Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Li Chitian must be dying of anger right now. "Wang Yi." "Yes, Magistrate Liu is here." Ji Yun, who was outside the door, reported. Pang Xiao smiled, took off his soft boots, and got on the heated Kang bed. Qin Yining pulled a brocade blanket over him and covered him with it, then took a dark purple soft pillow for him to lean on. Magistrate Liu entered the room and first greeted him with proper etiquette. Then, he respectfully went forward to take his pulse as a matter of routine. If it was at the beginning, Pang Xiao would still be a little weak from the long journey. Now that he had recuperated, he was even more energetic. Magistrate Liu couldn't help but secretly rejoice that Your Majesty only arranged for him to treat Wang Yi. If he occasionally sent someone to check on him, wouldn't he be exposed? Your Majesty would probably skin him alive. Wang Yi's body. Magistrate Liu hesitantly looked up at Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao covered his mouth and coughed twice. Magistrate Liu immediately understood and said, "Wang Yi's body hasn't fully recovered, and his old injuries won't recover in a day or two. Please don't overwork Wang Yi and take care of himself." Pang Xiao nodded. Qin Yining worriedly asked, "Magistrate Liu, please consider the prescription carefully. Is Wang Yi all right?" Magistrate Liu said calmly, "Wang Yi is fine, but you still need to follow this humble one's prescription." Qin Yining nodded and politely escorted Magistrate Liu out to write the prescription. After he left, the husband and wife looked at each other and burst into laughter. Just as the two were discussing what to eat for dinner, there was a sudden rush of footsteps outside the door. Bing Tang quickly walked in and said, "Wang Yi, Wang Fei, Duke Ding has come to visit." "Ah Lan." Pang Xiao sat up in surprise. In the few days he had been back, no one had come to visit, whether it was his former colleagues or comrades. The Wang Fu was deserted, and he deliberately didn't renovate the residence. If it wasn't for the occasional few servants walking around, the Wang Fu would be no different from a haunted house. He didn't expect that the first person to come, and the only one who dared to come, was still Ji Ziyu. Qin Yining said with emotion, "At that time, Imperial Censor Dai Lin took advantage of the morning hall in our house to bring people to block the door and cause trouble. If Duke Ding hadn't arrived in time, who knows what would have happened. Now that you are sick, and he is the first one to come, we must not disappoint him." Pang Xiao nodded and stood up to greet him with Qin Yining. Not long after, he saw Ji Ziyu, who was tall and beautiful but cold as ice, wearing a light blue shirt with arrow sleeves and a cloak with a grey mouse collar on his shoulder, walking toward him. "Ah Lan." Pang Xiao smiled and walked down the steps to greet him. When Ji Ziyu saw Pang Xiao, a smile appeared on his originally expressionless handsome face. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. "Jishi." He looked at Pang Xiao from head to toe. "Are you feeling better?" "I'm fine." Pang Xiao held Ji Ziyu's wrist and said with a smile, "We brothers haven't seen each other for a long time. How have you been?" Ji Ziyu looked at Pang Xiao with a smile, then nodded at Qin Yining and followed him up the steps into the main room. Qin Yining smiled and went to prepare tea and refreshments. He left the room for the two brothers to catch up. Ji Ziyu took off his cloak and threw it on a chair. He and Pang Xiao sat on either side of the Kang table to warm the Kang. Pang Xiao held the pot and poured a cup of tea for Ji Ziyu. "Have you been in the capital all this time? Has your Majesty arranged any other tasks for you?" Ji Ziyu picked up the teacup and took a sip. He shook his head and said, "No. But it doesn't matter. The way things are now is good. You, on the other hand." Ji Ziyu looked at Pang Xiao's rosy cheeks and high-spirited appearance. He couldn't help but laugh. "It seems that your old illness isn't very serious. You should stay in the Fu to recuperate. Don't go out to stroll around. If your Majesty sees your rosy cheeks, he'll be so angry that he'll fall ill." It was rare for Ji Ziyu, a man of few words, to say so many teasing words in one breath. Pang Xiao laughed heartily and said, "Ji Lan, you're still the same after not seeing you for so long." Ji Ziyu saw that Pang Xiao was so cheerful. He originally wanted to comfort Pang Xiao but didn't say anything. He only asked, "You should know that Shang Chuan led a group of imperial censors to impeach you, right?" "Yes, I already know." Pang Xiao didn't hide the fact that he always paid attention to the news of the imperial court. Ji Ziyu said, "You should also take precautions early. Your Majesty hasn't done anything now, but it doesn't mean that he won't do anything in the future. I heard that you and Shang Chuan had some irreconcilable enmity in the past. Let's start from the bottom. Even when we attacked BG, we did it according to official business. We never did anything excessive. How could we have any enmity with Shang Chuan?" Pang Xiao laughed. "Even if there was enmity in the past, Daju's imperial court has been established for 8 years. No matter how many enmities there are, they can't win against time. Now that everyone is living a stable life, why would he look for trouble for no reason?" Pang Xiao thought for a while, then leaned closer to Ji Ziyu and whispered, "Don't worry, I have my own plans." Seeing Pang Xiao's confident look, Ji Ziyu's worried heart relaxed a little. Then, he said in realization, "I knew it. Your wife isn't a domineering and impulsive person. On the contrary, she is very cautious. She actually sent Shang Jihua back with a plank. There must be something else going on." When Pang Xiao heard Ji Ziyu's evaluation of Qin Yining, he felt relieved and laughed again. Ji Ziyu was also affected by Pang Xiao's laughter. He said with a smile, "Forget it. Since you have your own plans, I won't ask anymore. If there's anything you want to do, just order someone to inform me. I have nothing to do at home anyway." Pang Xiao's gaze deepened. "So, you can do anything?" Ji Ziyu was stunned for a moment, then smiled, "Of course." His words seemed to have made some kind of promise. Pang Xiao and Ji Ziyu looked at each other and smiled. The two of them then talked about their lives after they parted. Although they didn't directly talk about politics, it was obvious that their opinions were still the same as before. Qin Yining had already prepared a table of food and came over to invite the two of them to take a seat. He didn't stay for long and casually ate 2 mouthfuls. Then, he excused himself and left, leaving the two of them alone. Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao didn't pay attention to the rule of not talking while eating. They chatted while eating. "How are you going to deal with your impeachment today?" Without waiting for Pang Xiao's reply, Ji Ziyu sneered again. "Those imperial censors are like mad dogs. They're useless, but they don't let go of others. While you're fighting on the battlefield and sweating for the country, they're still enjoying themselves in the land of women. Now they want to get rid of you after you've outlived your usefulness." These words weren't just directed at the imperial censors, but also at Li Qitian. Pang Xiao patted Ji Ziyu's shoulder comfortingly and filled his wine cup. "Let's not talk about these troublesome matters. If they want to impeach me, then let them. Your Majesty won't immediately sentence me to death anyway. As long as I'm alive, there's nothing I can't overcome." As he spoke, he clinked his cup with Ji Ziyu. The two of them happily drank their cups. Pang Xiao then continued, "I plan to wait and see. I want to see what the people in the court think about this matter. It's rare to have such a good opportunity to test real gold. You plan to pretend to compromise first? Yes. Pang Xiao smiled. Even a man like me faints. It's not that difficult to admit defeat. Ji Ziyu smiled. Don't say that. When I heard that you fainted, it really gave me a fright. We've suffered injuries and lost a lot of blood over the years. If some old illness relapses, it won't be a joke. You and I aren't teenagers anymore. Now that we're standing up, we should also think about recuperating. Chapter 9:14. Ji Ziyu smiled and glared at Pang Xiao. He also felt that it was very funny. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Now that I see you, I can't help but talk a lot. Pang Xiao couldn't help but sigh. Ji Ziyu's life was different from his. Even when he and Qin Yining were forced to separate, he still cared about each other in his heart. He knew that Qin Yining was silently doing things for him. Even if he did things, he had a direction and goal to strive for. But Ji Ziyu wasn't as lucky as him. Pang Xiao said, "If you have time, come and drink with me in the future. If you can't go through the front door, you can also climb over the wall. I'll go back and tell the guards not to stop you even if they see you climbing over the wall. You, on the other hand, don't even let people go through the front door when you ask them to drink. Hey, why are you so good at distorting people?" The two brothers joked with each other. This meal lasted until midnight. When Ji Ziyu said goodbye, Pang Xiao thought for a while and said, "Why don't you practice climbing over the wall today?" Li Qitian must have arranged spies outside the prince's mansion. Ji Ziyu had been here for so long. If he swaggered out now, he was afraid that the spies would return to Li Qitian. They were both generals and Li Qitian's sworn brothers. They had been together for so long. What exactly did they discuss? Pang Xiao didn't want Li Qitian to misunderstand Ji Ziyu. In case they fell out one day, he didn't want Ji Ziyu to be implicated for no reason. Ji Ziyu immediately understood what Pang Xiao was thinking. "I drank a lot today. It's not good for me to climb over the wall. I'll go through the front door." Pang Xiao was choked by Ji Ziyu's words. He pulled his sleeve and said, "You should listen to me." "No need. I know you mean well." Ji Ziyu smiled. "It's okay. I'll go now. Next time I want to climb, I'll come to your house's wall." Pang Xiao was amused by Ji Ziyu. He laughed. Since Ji Ziyu didn't care, he didn't have any interest in acting like a girl. He smiled and walked him to the front door. Ji Ziyu stopped him. "Go back and take care of yourself." Pang Xiao nodded in agreement when he saw that Ji Ziyu had reverted to his usual ice-cold appearance. He covered his mouth and coughed twice before he said, "Then, I won't see you out." "Hold on." The two bids TT. Pang Xiao watched Ji Ziyu walk away with large strides. Only then did he return to the main room. As soon as Ji Ziyu left the palace, someone immediately reported to Li Qitian. Li Qitian was about to go to bed. He sneered and sent the spies away. Li Qitian didn't feel sleepy at all. He put on his dragon robe and paced back and forth on the floor. He didn't rest until midnight. What happened in the imperial court naturally didn't reach the ears of the common people. However, Duke Changwu didn't seem to be satisfied with his first failed impeachment. The next day, he impeached Pang Xiao again. The content of the impeachment was the same as last time. The imperial censors were the same as last time. The high and mighty emperor even felt that they had memorized the articles in private. Li Qitian still couldn't convict Pang Xiao. He said that it would be investigated. At this time, most of the people in the imperial court were watching Your Majesty and Prince Zhengxian's attitude to make the best judgment. The news of Pang Xiao being impeached twice somehow spread throughout the streets and alleys of the capital city. Li Qitian was originally angry that Pang Xiao delayed his return to the capital because public opinion couldn't convict him. Now that he was being impeached twice, even if he couldn't agree, he could sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. He was enjoying watching the show. However, he didn't expect this matter to spread. There were many common people who went to greet Pang Xiao and saw him faint. Pang Xiao, this great hero, was covered with sadness. It wasn't just the common people. Pang Xiao's subordinates and some of his former subordinates, including the Tiger Army, were all sighing for Pang Xiao. Now that such a thing had happened, the displeasure in the hearts of the people who were already protesting for Pang Xiao increased by a few levels. Many imperial censors in the imperial court didn't care about what the common people were saying. They were more concerned about Pang Xiao's reaction. Although Pang Xiao claimed to be ill and hadn't participated in the imperial court for a long time, they didn't believe that Pang Xiao didn't know anything about the outside world. He knew his situation, but he still refused to say anything. Could it be that he was afraid? Many people felt that Pang Xiao was learning to lower his head and keep a low profile. He probably also felt the danger of being overshadowed by his achievements, so he took advantage of the situation before Your Majesty made a move. He wasn't the only one with such thoughts. Pang Xiao used to be a domineering figure, but now he seemed to be a different person. He just lay in his residence all day to recuperate. Even if someone made trouble for him, he didn't care. This way of doing things was completely different from the tough person he used to be. It was like he was a different person. It could be seen that even a great hero had to lower his head in front of imperial power. The imperial censors seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. In their eyes, Pang Xiao's silence was evidence that he had admitted defeat. The more Pang Xiao didn't say anything, the louder their voices of impeachment in the imperial court. The content of the impeachment was varied. They even mentioned that Pang Xiao had trampled on the farmers' fields when he led the Tiger Army to attack the Yang dynasty in the early years. Some even described Pang Xiao as a bully who did all kinds of evil. In these people's words, Pang Xiao went from being a hero who made great contributions to the founding of the Daiju dynasty to a bandit leader who did all kinds of evil in order to fill his own pockets. Li Chitian could only listen to the impeachment but couldn't nod his head. These voices of impeachment caused some people to be dissatisfied. Most of these people were civil officials and generals. Most of them had worked with Pang Xiao or were Pang Xiao's former subordinates. They knew Pang Xiao's character and admired his actions. They didn't expect that he would end up like this after serving the country wholeheartedly. Not only was he impeached so miserably, Your Majesty didn't even stop these rascals from talking nonsense. No matter how thick a towering tree was, it couldn't withstand being chewed by these vermin all day long. No matter how good a person's reputation was, it couldn't withstand public criticism. Many people felt bitterly disappointed. They even wondered if they would end up in the same situation one day. Li Chitian only wanted to see Pang Xiao make a fool of himself and neglected this point. Wang Yi, you haven't recovered yet, but those mad dogs are already barking. Brothers, we really feel indignant for you. Several of Pang Xiao's former subordinates from the Tiger Army came to visit him. Looking at Pang Xiao's half-new sky-blue wide-sleeved gown, he looked even more like a scholar. He was so weak that he didn't look like the awe-inspiring person he had on the battlefield. They felt even sadder. When Wang Yi led us to kill the enemy, those shameless things were still in their women's bed. Now they're just taking advantage of Wang Yi's silence and the fact that you don't have military power. Your Majesty is the same. You just let those people do whatever they want. Pang Xiao smiled and waved his hand to stop this topic from continuing. Don't talk about national affairs, and don't talk about Your Majesty. Pang Xiao's gentle appearance was a sharp contrast to his domineering appearance in the past. In these people's eyes, Pang Xiao was obviously suppressed by Your Majesty and couldn't even raise his head. Even his pride was almost worn away. When they left Wang Yi's residence, everyone's eyes were red with depression. Motherfucker, what the hell is this? Those who are loyal to the country are not rewarded well. Look at Wang Yi's food, clothing, and shelter now. Look at how quiet Wang Yi's residence is. His family is almost extinct. Wang Yi's illness is probably related to his family's tragic death. Wang Yi's twins, sigh, what a pity. Everyone's discussion wasn't limited to a small circle. Soon, such discussions spread from Pang Xiao's former subordinates and loyal followers to him, and gradually spread among the common people. The image of Pang Xiao as a tragic hero was once again deeply etched in everyone's minds. Xu Weiji and Xie Yu both tried to persuade Pang Xiao. Wang Yi's current situation is worrying. It's better to make early plans. Things have already gotten to this point. I'm afraid that wavering will hurt your reputation. That's right, Wang Yi. Looking at your Majesty's actions, regardless of what Wang Yi is like, this old man feels bitterly disappointed. If he really is a heroic ruler who can stabilize the country, why would he guard against someone who has never been disloyal to him? To this extent, he's unwilling to give him a quick death. It wasn't just Xie Yu and Xu Weiji who were indirectly persuading Pang Xiao to make a decision. Even the Jinghu Wei were on high alert, guarding Pang Xiao and Qin Yining's residence like an iron bucket. Tang Xiu's face was tense these days. She gathered with Huzi to discuss the defense and layout of the residence. After Pang Xiao and Qin Yining had lunch, they strolled around the Dao courtyard. Tang Xiu and Huzi immediately brought people to follow them, looking nervous as if they were preparing for battle. Pang Xiao smiled and said, "Why are you so nervous? This is our own home. There's no need to be like this, right?" However, Tang Xiu's delicate face was tense. She frowned and said, replying to Wang Yi, "Even if we're in the residence, we can't let our guard down. If someone can impeach Wang Yi behind his back, there's a possibility that someone will order someone to assassinate Wang Yi. Even in Beijing, it's not completely peaceful now." Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun looked at each other and didn't say anything. Qin Yining was very satisfied with this result. It seemed that after the propaganda of the tragic hero, Pang Xiao's grievances had been magnified countless times in everyone's hearts. The people close to him were even more aggrieved for Pang Xiao. However, they were in the residence of the emperor, so some words couldn't be said directly. This was the purpose of Qin Yining's plan. She wanted to give Pang Xiao a good reputation and establish a good image. No matter how things developed in the future, no matter what the final result was, she would not allow Pang Xiao to be scolded. Just as the servants and Jinghu Wei in the residence were holding their breaths, and many people outside the residence were complaining for Prince Zhongshiren who was recuperating, an invitation was sent to Prince Zhongshiren's residence by the steward of Zhongibo's residence. When Qin Yining heard that someone from the Lu family had come, she personally went to the front hall. Chapter 9:15. Qin Yining was a little surprised. He didn't expect Lu Heng to remarry at this time. However, it was only a matter of time before Lu Heng remarried. At his age, he lacked a matriarch who could manage the household and maintain relationships with the upper-class women. That position naturally couldn't remain empty. It had to be said that Lu Heng was finally willing to give up his feelings for her and remarry. Qin Yining heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. She wasn't a blockhead. Lu Heng had been so direct when facing her later on. As a married woman, she sometimes felt awkward when she saw Lu Heng. Now, with Lu Heng's remarriage, the past would turn a page. So it's a joyous occasion for the estate. Qin Yining put down the wedding invitation and said with a smile, "Originally, Wang Yi and I should be present at Zhongibo's wedding. However, I'm sure you know about our family's situation. Now that Wang Yi is sick in bed and the two of us are in mourning, it's really inappropriate for us to attend the wedding on such a good day. Please explain to Zhongibo on our behalf and thank Uncle for his kindness on our behalf. Wang Yi and I will definitely meticulously prepare a generous gift to congratulate Uncle and his newly wedded wife for 100 years of bliss." When the steward heard this, he nodded understandingly and bowed. "Yes, this lowly one will definitely pass on your message." Qin Yining rewarded the steward with a big red envelope and ordered someone to see the guests out. After the steward left, Qin Yining returned to his room with the wedding invitation. He pulled up Pang Xiao, who was lying on the heated kang and reading a military book while eating melon seeds. "What does Lu Heng want to do?" Pang Xiao tossed the book aside and pulled Qin Yining into his arms to sit down. His entire body was filled with hostility and vigilance. It was as if it was about to materialize. Qin Yining found it funny and handed the wedding invitation to him. "Zhong Ibo is remarrying." Pang Xiao was startled, and the corner of her mouth could not help but raise. "Is that so?" He unfolded the wedding invitation and looked at it carefully. Finally, his fingertips landed on the two words bien at the end. Qin Yining leaned on Pang Xiao's shoulder and looked at the wedding invitation. He asked, "Do you know who this bien is?" Pang Xiao thought about it carefully. There is no official in the imperial court who can talk about marriage with Zhongibor's Lu family and who has this surname. However, as far as I know, your majesty has a concubine by his side. Her surname seems to be Bien. Her father used to be a county magistrate in the northern Ji dynasty. Now, he has retired. However, it is said that the Bien family's financial resources should not be underestimated. Qin Yining thought of Lu Heng and couldn't help but frown slightly. So, this is 99% likely to be a marriage of interest. Pang Xiao put down the wedding invitation and said, "How many people in the imperial court can be as lucky as me to marry the woman they love?" This was the truth, but it was also a straightforward statement of love. Qin Yining smiled and lightly punched Pang Xiao's shoulder. However, Pang Xiao pulled her white fingers close to his lips and kissed them. In the end, as if he was not satisfied, he gently bit her fingertips, causing a tingling sensation. Qin Yining's cheeks flushed. "Stop fooling around." "Okay, I won't fool around," he promised, but did not stop. "What did you say?" Qin Yining struggled for a while before pulling his hand away. He rolled his eyes at Pang Xiao and said, "We are both in mourning. How can we attend the wedding banquet? I think Zhong Yibor sent the wedding invitation out of courtesy. I told the steward that we will send the wedding gifts later. We won't be going." "Okay." Pang Xiao leaned against the large pillow, one hand hugging Qin Yining and the other hand behind her head. He clicked his tongue and said, "He is finally willing to remarry. Not bad." He seemed to heave a huge sigh of relief. Qin Yining naturally knew what he was thinking. He shook his head in amusement and did not say anything. Pang Xiao said, "I will prepare the wedding gifts later. You don't have to interfere." Knowing that he was still jealous, Qin Yining tactfully nodded and said, "It is good that you are willing to prepare the gifts. I will not interfere in the matters between you men. When the time comes, I will order someone to send it in your name." Pang Xiao felt very happy and planted a loud kiss on Qin Yining's forehead. At Zhongyibor's residence, Lu Heng received the wedding gifts from Prince Zhongshiren's residence. He looked at the rich contents of the gift list and threw it to the steward without interest. "Uncle, it seems that Prince Zhongshiren is..." Before the steward could finish his flattering words, he saw Lu Heng's expressionless face. For a moment, all the words were stuck in his throat. "You can leave." "Yes." The steward hurriedly retreated as though he had been pardoned. Lu Heng stood in front of the window of the study with his hands behind his back. The warm light of the lanterns hanging high outside the window could be faintly seen through the closed window. His hands behind his back clenched and unclenched, then clenched again. In the end, he sighed helplessly. There was no trace of her in the gift list. He was about to get married, but Qin Yining did not express anything. She only used her status as the mistress of the Wang Fu to thank the servant he arranged to send the wedding invitation. The wedding gifts were also given to him, but he could not see any of her intentions. In the past, when he did not remarry, there was still a glimmer of hope. Now that he was about to remarry, the hope was very slim. Lu Heng's unwillingness and struggle could not be shown in front of anyone. He could only hide all his frustrations in his heart. Bian Shi was concubine Zhuang's younger cousin. Her background was not very high. In the eyes of the Lu family, she was not very noble. However, with the status of concubine Zhuang, who was currently favored, if he married Bian Shi, Bian and your majesty would become relatives. He was the clan leader of the Lu family. He no longer had the right to be willful. Other than thinking for himself, he also had to consider the situation of the family. After his grandfather passed away, many things were out of his control. However, he also had more opportunities to show his strength. Right now, the Lu family was developing according to his plan. Tying themselves to the Son of Heaven was the only choice. He had already waited for Qin Yining for so long. He could not wait any longer. As for remarrying, he was no longer against it. However, ever since that glimpse in the restaurant that day, he had lost his soul. How could he find it again? He was not willing to accept not being able to obtain Qin Yining. Lu Heng was filled with sorrow. In front of others, he had to pretend to be happy. Every night, when it was quiet, only the cold lanterns would know of his unwillingness and resentment. The preparations for the wedding proceeded in an orderly manner. The patriarch of the Liu family was remarrying, concubine Zhuang's cousin was getting married. No matter how one looked at it, this wedding could not be done half-heartedly. In a few days, the topic of conversation for the people in Jing finally changed from the treated hero to Zhong Yibor, who was about to get married. After this period of time, Li Qitian's thoughts were changing. Chang Guogong and the imperial censors participating in the Pang Xiao had made him very happy. However, after thinking about it, he felt that this kind of participation was adding insult to injury. Originally, the people were saying that he, the emperor, was deliberately trying to murder a meritorious official. His hands and feet were tied because of this matter. Since he could not punish Pang Xiao at this time, it was better to completely let this matter go. It was better than him standing at the heart of the storm. Now that there was Lu Heng's wedding, the people's attention was finally diverted. He did not have to worry about people saying that he was heartless and unjust behind his back. However, the development of the matter did not go as Li Qitian had expected. Chang Guogong actually took the lead in impeaching Pang Xiao a few days later. This time, his words were so fierce that it was as if Pang Xiao had dug up his family's ancestral grave. The public opinion that had just been suppressed once again flourished. Finally, Li Qitian could not help but pull a long face in the imperial court. It was not good for him to speak his mind, so he snorted at Duke Chang Guogong, then left the entire imperial court with a flick of his sleeves. Your Majesty's actions caused many people to discuss. Some people analyzed that Your Majesty was angry because Chang Guogong had repeatedly wronged Prince Zhongshuren. However, the majority of people felt that Your Majesty was angry at Prince Zhongshuren's innumerable evil deeds. In the period from February to March, the people had been discussing Pang Xiao's impeachment and Zhong Yibor's remarriage. On the 6th day of the 3rd month, Qin Yining was leisurely doing needlework with Bing Tang and Ji Yun. The new second-rank servant girl, Ziyuan, quickly walked in. She respectfully bowed and said crisply, "Wang Fei, the Countess of Anping has sent an invitation." Qin Yining smiled as she put down the embroidery. "Let me see." Ziyuan presented the invitation with both hands. On the invitation, the Countess of Anping asked if she was free this afternoon. Qin Yining thought about it and told Ziyuan, "Tell the steward to reply that I am free this afternoon. If the Countess of Anping is willing to come, I will definitely welcome her." Ziyuan was not literate, but her memory was very good. After hearing Qin Yining's words, she immediately remembered them. She bowed and quickly retreated. Bing Tang smiled and said, "Among the new servant girls, Ziyuan is the smartest. I think Han Xiao is also good." Ji Yun smiled and said, "Wang Fei is also carefully cultivating the two of them." "Yes." Qin Yining said, "Ziyuan is very smart. Han Xiao's personality is somewhat like Qiu Lu's. She is very steady." Ji Yun and Bing Tang both smiled and continued to do needlework. Ji Yun asked, "This is the first time the Countess of Anping has come to visit. I have never seen you meet her in private before." Qin Yining said, "I have met the Countess of Anping a few times. When Wang Yi and I were not married, the Empress Dowager hosted a banquet in Xi'an Palace to entertain the families of the nobles and officials. Wang Yi was so angry that he flipped the table. At that time, the Countess of Anping was present. It is said that the Countess of Anping is an old official of BG. Like the Duke of Changguo, she was left behind by Your Majesty to show her benevolence. Usually, she is far away from the center of power. She is just a noble in name and enjoys her old age." Ji Yun nodded and said, "You should be mentally prepared for such a person to suddenly come to you." Qin Yining nodded. "It's okay. Both of you will follow me in the afternoon." Bing Tang and Ji Yun both smiled and agreed. After lunch, the Countess of Anping came. The Countess of Anping was about 40 years old. She was tall and had a long face with wrinkles on it. Her glossy black hair was tied into a bun and held in place by 3 silver hairpins. She wore no other accessories or makeup. Seeing that she was wearing a sapphire blue narrow-sleeved robe and a dark blue long skirt, Qin Yining guessed that the Countess of Anping's family might have just had a funeral. Qin Yining warmly welcomed her and invited her into the warm room to have tea. Chapter 9:16. Qin Yining smiled politely. Many thanks. Countess of Anping, please take a seat. I don't dare. Wang Fei, please. Countess of Anping and Qin Yining greeted each other courteously before sitting side by side. Ji Yun and Bing Tang served refreshments and then quietly retreated to a corner. Qin Yining handed a teacup to Countess of Anping. Please have a taste. This is black tea that just came in. The weather is cold. Black tea is good for the body. Countess of Anping saw that Qin Yining was so easygoing and relaxed. In the past, she had heard that the Qin clan was greatly favored by Prince Zhongshuren. She was also a daughter of noble birth and was so beautiful. Based on her experience, she assumed that this was a woman with a slightly arrogant temper. Even though the Count of Anping had a noble title, he had not been in power for a long time and had left the center of power for many years. They naturally could not compare to the only prince of this dynasty with a different surname. Therefore, Countess of Anping wanted to make friends and politely chatted with Qin Yining. A moment later, she found that Qin Yining was as easy to get along with as she appeared to be. She did not continue to be careful and spoke more freely. After chatting for a while, Countess of Anping saw that the atmosphere was good and said with a smile, I came to disturb Wang Fei today to invite Wang Fei on behalf of Zhongibo and the Bian family. Oh! Qin Yining did not change her expression. Is it about the wedding banquet? You also saw that it is not convenient for me and Wang Yi to attend the banquet. 1. We are afraid of offending the newlyweds. 2. We are in the mourning period and cannot have fun. Wang Fei is right. This is the same as our Fu, Countess of Anping said. Look at me and you know. However, Zhong Yibo, Zhuang Pin, and the Bian family discussed and felt that it would not be good to neglect us like this. For Zhong Yibo's wedding this time, many of the noble families in court are in the mourning period and can only send gifts but cannot attend the banquet. Thus, Count Zhongyi booked a private room in a restaurant not far from Count Zhongyi's mansion. There was no singing or dancing inside, nor was there any musical instruments. Only 2 tables were arranged for a simple meal. Those of us who couldn't attend the wedding banquet could just gather together and have a simple meal. Count Zhongyi also knows about the matter of your Fu, but I ask that Wang Fei and Wang Yi do me the honor of going. Otherwise, Count Zhongyi will feel very apologetic. Qin Yining was a little hesitant. Actually, it was very common to hold another banquet in a quiet place to thank the guests who could not attend the wedding banquet. If the rest of the guests who could not attend the wedding banquet personally nodded their heads, and she and Pang Xiao did not agree, it would be a source of gossip. Not only would it offend people, it would also leave a lot of room for people to talk nonsense behind their backs. Qin Yining did not want to be too unsociable with Pang Xiao. Countess of Anping saw Qin Yining's hesitation and said with a smile, Wang Fei is worried that there will be no familiar people going? The 2 of us hit it off so well. When the time comes, we can sit next to each other and I can introduce you. Most of the madams and misses in the city are very easygoing. In the future, you will naturally become familiar with them. This was one of the reasons why Qin Yining wanted to go. She was not familiar with the upper-class women in court. When she returned to Jing and settled down, the first thing she needed to do was to understand the interactions between the women. With this opportunity, she could enter the circle of upper-class women early and not have to find another opportunity. Qin Yining guessed that Pang Xiao would be jealous. However, they both knew the importance of the matter. Pang Xiao was a reasonable person and should agree with her decision. Thinking of this, Qin Yining did not hesitate. She nodded and said, Countess of Anping is right. When will it be? Hearing her agree, the Countess of Anping smiled and said, on the 8th day of the new year, on the day of their wedding, there is a restaurant called Shun Fu near the Count's estate. Don't worry, we are just looking for another place to have a meal. We won't break the rules. Qin Yining nodded and said with a smile, I will definitely keep the appointment. However, my Wang Yi has not been well recently and is bedridden. Perhaps he won't be able to come along. Since Qin Yining agreed, Countess of Anping already had something to say to the Count of Anping. Moreover, what was Pang Xiao's status? How could he allow outsiders to interfere with what he wanted to do? Countess of Armping agreed and stood up with a smile to bid farewell. Qin Yining personally saw her to the door before returning to the inner residence. Pang Xiao asked for the reason in detail. Qin Yining explained in detail. Finally, she said, when we returned to Jing, only Duke Ding and a few of your former subordinates dared to visit you while you were bedridden. At this time, there is a lot of danger. We should also find a suitable way to expand our network. Pang Xiao thought for a moment and said, what you said makes sense. Since that's the case, you should take Ji Yun and Bing Tang with you on the 8th day of the new year. One of them is skilled in martial arts, and the other is good at using medicine. With them by your side, I can feel more at ease. I will also arrange for a few people to secretly protect you. I won't let anything happen to you. Qin Yining was a little surprised by Pang Xiao's attitude. Didn't he not like her to have anything to do with Lu Heng? She admired Pang Xiao for being so reasonable. If a woman who had coveted Pang Xiao for a long time was about to get married and didn't forget to invite Pang Xiao before the wedding, she would more or less feel uncomfortable in her heart. Qin Yining was only thinking about Pang Xiao's magnanimity, but he didn't know that Pang Xiao was cursing Lu Heng's 18 generations of ancestors in her heart. Regardless of who Lu Heng was going to marry or who he was attracted to, he had always coveted his sister Yi in the past. When he couldn't get her, he would even do something behind her back. If it wasn't for his trust in Qin Yining's character and knowing that Lu Heng was only good to concubine Zhuang's cousin in order to curry favor with Li Qitian and didn't dare to do anything else, he would have directly gone to Zhong Ibor's residence to grab this person's collar and kick him to vent his anger. Although her thoughts were complicated, Pang Xiao appeared to be very magnanimous on the surface. She didn't want Qin Yining to look down on her and think that she was a narrow-minded person. On the 8th day of the new year, Qin Yining got up early in the morning. Ji Yun brought over a crescent-white brocade robe with dark cloud patterns that had been prepared beforehand and helped her wash and change her clothes. Bing Tang skillfully flipped her hands and tied Qin Yining's long black hair into a bun and decorated it with a plain silver phoenix hairpin. Pang Xiao leaned against the big pillow next to the window and read a book. Out of the corner of his eye, he kept looking in Qin Yining's direction. He saw that she was wearing light-colored clothes and there were no gold or gems on her hair. She didn't even wear bright makeup, but her beauty and charm came from the inside out. He didn't even want to blink when he looked at her. Qin Yining finished tidying up. When she turned around, she met Pang Xiao's scorching gaze that was full of admiration. She couldn't help laughing and said, "Wang Yi, what are you looking at?" "I'm looking at how beautiful my sister Yi is." Pang Xiao got up and walked over to Qin Yining. He put his big hands around her and said, "Sister Yi, why don't we not go today?" Qin Yining laughed and said, "We're already prepared." "Why not go?" Pang Xiao snorted and said, "Our sister Yi is so beautiful. Why should we let them look at her for nothing?" Qin Yining burst into laughter. Domineering. Still domineering. Pang Xiao acted shamelessly. Ji Yun and Bing Tang saw that Pang Xiao and Qin Yining were together again. They suppressed their laughter and quietly retreated. Wang Yi and Wang Fei are so affectionate. Does Wang Yi hate that Wang Fei can't cover her face wherever she goes? Bing Tang joked with a smile. Ji Yun giggled. "You still dare to say that? Aren't you and your families whoozy like this?" Bing Tang's face immediately turned red. She stomped her feet and glared at Ji Yun. "You bad wench. You only know how to make things up. Don't tell me that you and Imperial Bodyguard Tang haven't, Aya. You still dare to say that." Ji Yun's face also turned red. The two servant girls glared at each other. Their cheeks were rosy and their eyes were watery. Qin Yining came out of the room. Seeing them like this, he asked curiously, "What's going on? Are they fighting over sweets?" Ji Yun and Bing Tang couldn't help but laugh. Qin Yining brought the two out. Pang Xiao called Tang Xiu over and whispered a few words to her. The driver and bodyguard of Qin Yining's carriage had been replaced with Jinghu Wei. Their safety was completely guaranteed. When the carriage arrived at Shunfu Restaurant, the steward guarding the street saw that it was the imperial carriage from Duke of Qin's Fu and quickly came forward to respectfully welcome them. Qin Yining followed the steward into the restaurant and went directly to a private room at the end of the corridor on the second floor. Wang Fei, the womenfolk are all here. Please come in. Qin Yining nodded and entered the room after the steward announced his arrival. When he looked from outside the door, he thought that this was just a normal room that could fit 1 or 2 square tables. But when he entered, he found that this private room was very spacious. It could fit 8 or 10 tables without a problem. Many womenfolk had already arrived. Just as the Countess of Anping had said yesterday, the womenfolk that came here were all unable to attend for some reason. Everyone attending the wedding banquet was wearing plain clothing. Qin Yining's white robe did not seem out of place among the plain white, ivory white, and sapphire blue of the furon. The Countess of Anping's sharp eyes noticed that Qin Yining had arrived and hurriedly came forward with a smile. Prince Zhongxian's consort has come? Come quickly. As she spoke, she affectionately took Qin Yining's hand and walked towards the square table that the womenfolk were sitting around. She smiled and said, "This is Prince Zhongxian's consort." Some of the womenfolk present looked familiar to Qin Yining, but some were unfamiliar. Qin Yining nodded in greeting without batting an eyelid. Then he followed the enthusiastic Countess of Anping to recognize everyone present. These furon were different from the other madams of officials that Qin Yining had seen before. These womenfolk were in similar situations. Most of the men in their families had already left the core of power. They all had a bit of a calm and peaceful aura. Perhaps it was because they had not been involved in matters of the imperial court for too long. Each of them seemed to be very peaceful. Even the speed at which they spoke was slower. Each of them was neither fast nor slow and had their own bearing. Qin Yining had a good memory. After recognizing a circle of people, he remembered everyone and analyzed each of their personalities. These furon were also very familiar with Qin Yining. This woman's life was too legendary. More importantly, the groom of today's wedding had once had some relationship with this woman in front of them. Chapter 9:17. Several of the women present today had attended the banquet with Qin Yining at Xi'an Palace. That day, when the Empress Dowager saw Lu Heng, she called him Heng Jie and almost treated him as her own nephew. At that time, the Qin clan's Yunying was still unmarried. Anyone with eyes could see that the Empress Dowager wanted to play matchmaker. If it wasn't for Prince Zhongshiren daring to flip the table in front of the Empress Dowager, perhaps this Prince Zhongshiren's consort would be called Lu Furen. When everyone saw Qin Yining, they all had their own thoughts. However, they were all smart people and their statuses weren't low. They wouldn't say things that would make the other party look bad. Instead, they chatted happily. These women, who were far away from politics, naturally tended to talk about daily necessities. They would also talk about some trivial matters of the family. Qin Yining rarely interacted with them. When she was with Pang Xiao, other than romantic matters, it was the politics of the imperial court. Her social circle almost didn't overlap with these noble women. Today, when she saw these women talking about trivial matters and finding joy in each other, Qin Yining couldn't help but feel that it was interesting. It was rare that she didn't have to think about life and death matters. It was quite interesting to sit among the noble women and listen to these trivial matters. Wang Fei, have some fruit. Bing Tang brought a small plate of finely cut fruit and placed it next to Qin Yining's hand. Then, she handed a small silver fork inlaid with gems to her. Qin Yining ate the fruit to pass the time. Occasionally, she would chat with the noble women. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words had substance. These noble women and girls who weren't familiar with Qin Yining now had a new understanding of her. They felt that this was the strength of character that only a woman from a prestigious family could have. After all, Qin Huiyuan's wise pan and title was known by everyone in Dian and BG. In the afternoon, the banquet still hadn't been set up. Ji Yun had already quietly gone out to inquire. When she came back, she whispered in Qin Yining's ear, "The wedding banquet of Lu Mansion is in the evening today, so we will have to wait until then to set up the banquet." Qin Yining nodded in understanding. Although they said that they were having a simple meal, they had gathered together for Lu Heng's wedding, so the timing of the banquet was naturally the same. As a result, Qin Yining was not in a hurry to go back. He took it as a day of leisure for himself. At noon, everyone ate some snacks and fruits, and a few of the women gathered together to draw tiles. There were also a few who were tired and went to find a private room to rest. Ji Yun and Bing Tang were also worried that Qin Yining would get sick of the smell. They had already discussed with the owner of the restaurant and prepared a private room for Qin Yining to rest. Unexpectedly, before Qin Yining could get up, a wife quickly walked up the stairs. Her footsteps fell on the wooden floor, making a series of hurried footsteps. "Ladies and misses, Madame Zhong Ibor is here." The women who were drawing tiles and chatting stopped what they were doing. They looked at each other and felt that it was strange. "Did I hear wrongly? Madame Zhong Ibor? Isn't Madame Zhong Ibor getting married today?" "That's right, the bride shouldn't have gone through the wedding ceremony yet, right? Why did she come out?" The women all felt that it was strange. Qin Yining also stood up in confusion. He looked at Bing Tang and Ji Yun and whispered, "Is Madame Bien really here?" The person outside said so he shouldn't have seen wrongly. Amidst everyone's surprise, a series of footsteps quickly sounded. The door to the private room was pushed open, and a group of maidservants dressed in red and green walked in, escorting a beautiful young woman in her late 20s. The young woman was of medium height, with a pink face and peachy cheeks. The ends of her eyes were slanted, and there was a hint of arrogance in her playfulness. The red robe on her body outlined her voluptuous figure, making her lively temperament even more gorgeous. The upper-class women present were all experienced and knowledgeable people. Once they saw Madame Bien's appearance, they all knew what was going on. "So it really is Zhong Ibor's fiancé." "That's right. The bride actually came out at this time?" Bien Ruohan didn't greet these women, nor did she bother to respond. Her bright almond eyes stared at Qin Yining. There was 30% understanding in her eyes, 30% envy, and 40% jealousy. "You are from the Qin clan?" Bien Ruohan walked straight to Qin Yining. She didn't call her Wang Fei, nor did she politely call her older sister based on her age. She was actually so unfriendly. Qin Yining couldn't help but raise her eyebrows in surprise. She was actually targeting her. The upper-class women who wanted to take the initiative to talk to Bien Ruohan also stopped and revealed expressions of watching a good show. It had to be known that Lu Heng and the Prince Zhongxian's consort had almost become a couple. Perhaps they really did have a relationship, and right now, Madame Bien was Lu Heng's newly wedded wife. On the day of the wedding, Madame Bien didn't dress up at home and wait for the bridal sedan to arrive. Instead, she personally came here and targeted the Prince Zhongxian's consort with jealousy and hatred. They hadn't seen such a good show in many years. If the Prince Zhongxian's consort and Zhong Ibor didn't have a relationship, then why would this person in front of them act like this? Many of the upper-class women were quietly watching the show, and some of them were exchanging glances. It was clear that they had already fabricated a passionate love and hate entanglement in their hearts. Bien Ruohan ignored everyone and walked to Qin Yining's side. She discovered that she wasn't as tall as the other party, so she didn't want to lose to Qin Yining in terms of aura. She coldly snorted and took 2 steps back. "Everyone says that you're an outstanding beauty. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation." She dragged out the last syllable of her voice, not hiding her hostility and harshness at all. "You flatter me. Today is Madame Zhong Ibor's wedding day. The auspicious hour is about to arrive, but Madame Zhong Ibor is willing to entertain guests. Those of us who can't attend the wedding banquet for various reasons are really overwhelmed by this favor." Qin Yining's words caused the other madams to whisper to each other. They had seen many weddings, but they had never seen the bride casually walk around before the wedding ceremony. Bien Ruohan's eyes revealed a hint of viciousness and resentment. "You're indeed a woman with a glib tongue." Qin Yining smiled and said, "Madame Zhong Ibor is too kind." She calmly expressed her thanks, as if Bien Ruohan was sincerely thanking her. Bien Ruohan abruptly took a deep breath and said coldly, "I came here to tell you that you took care of my duke in the past. In the future, with me by his side, you can rest. Don't forget your status. Don't lose your dignity." "What are you talking about? Whether or not you took care of Zhong Ibor is your business." What does it have to do with me? You're still young, so please think twice before you speak. Don't lose your dignity. Qin Yining's expression turned cold. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, and when she was truly angry, her aura was truly oppressive. Bian Ruohan was stunned by Qin Yining's appearance. When he regained his senses, his face was red with anger. What? Nowadays, people who have done bad things are acting righteous. Do you think that everyone doesn't know what you've done just because you're so righteous and strict? You're just hugging someone's thigh and becoming a lowly consort. What right do you have to be so arrogant? No matter how powerful you are, the Duke will still marry me in the end. The Liu family's madam will still be me. The room was completely silent. The upper-class madams all had their own thoughts. Bian Ruohan's maidservant was so anxious that she was about to cry. She pulled on her sleeve and said, "It's almost time. Young miss, you should go back quickly." "That's right, young miss. It's not good to delay the time." Bian Ruohan snorted. "Just you wait. I'll let you go today. If you dare to seduce the Duke again, I won't let you go." Without waiting for Qin Yining's response, he turned and quickly walked away. This was an unexpected calamity. Qin Yining's face was calm as he elegantly sat back in his seat. He laughed softly. It seems that Zhong Ibor's fu will be very lively in the future. The Countess of Anping recovered from her shock and smiled as she tried to smooth things over. Young girls listen to the wind and jump to conclusions. When they speak, they don't think. "Wang Fei, you must not take it to heart." Qin Yining calmly said, "Of course I won't take it to heart. I'm not the one who has lost the demeanor of a noble family. Wang Fei is so magnanimous." Several matrons also stepped in to smooth things over. They couldn't help but admire Qin Yining. Qin Yining's words about losing the demeanor of a noble family really hit the nail on the head. The Bian family had only produced a concubine. Their family had some wealth. How could they have raised such an arrogant woman who didn't know etiquette? If it had been them, regardless of whether the matter was true or false, they would have fled long ago after being pointed at and criticized in front of others. But Qin Yining didn't seem to mind at all. If she left at this time, it would arouse suspicion. Even if there was nothing between her and Zhong Ibor, it would be said that she had a guilty conscience and was ashamed to see others. Now that she had displayed such magnanimity, it made people look down on Bianxi's words and actions even more. Ji Yun and Bing Tang were already fuming with anger. When the matrons went to do their own things, Bing Tang leaned close to Qin Yining and said in a low voice, "Wang Fei, do you want me to make a medicine?" "No need." Qin Yining smiled and said, "It's not worth wasting your medicine on such a brainless person." Qin Yining's eyes narrowed slightly, as if they were twinkling with cold light. There must be a mastermind behind the scenes to make a young girl do such a thing. "You suspect concubine Zhuang?" Qin Yining smiled and didn't say much. Concubine Zhuang was just a concubine. Who did she have to look at when she did things? She was just a concubine who was working hard to climb up the ranks in the imperial harem. She didn't have any grudges with her. If someone didn't give her a hint, would she dare to offend Prince Zhongshuren? Although Li Qitian was afraid of Pang Xiao, this was something that only a few people knew. In the eyes of the public, Wang Yi was still a great hero. Your Majesty was somewhat negligent, but he still had to go out of the city to welcome him. So Qin Yining had reason to suspect that today's matter was pushed by Li Qitian in order to cause trouble for Pang Xiao. Qin Yining's smile became even gentler. She would definitely break the wings of anyone who wanted to cause trouble for Pang Xiao. If she was asked, could she have guessed wrong? Qin Yining wouldn't consider whether she guessed wrong or not. In any case, Li Qitian was someone she was committed to teaching a lesson to. Who asked him to harm Pang Xiao? The women present didn't mention this matter again. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, the banquet was prepared, and the noble ladies entered the banquet according to their status. Not far away, the sound of joyous music and firecrackers could be heard coming from Zhong Ibor's residence. The women in Shunfu restaurant also started to have their meals. They were born in noble families, so they naturally paid attention to the rule of not talking while eating. They didn't come purely to eat, so they didn't eat much. After the meal, the waiter served tea. Qin Yining took the tea and continued to chat with the madams. It was almost time for her to leave and return to her residence. Who knew that at this time, another set of footsteps could be heard? The entire Shorenfu restaurant had been reserved. Since someone came, it must be related to the Bo family. Chapter 9:18. When Qin Yining heard this, he subconsciously furrowed his brows. To the side, the Countess of Anping quickly said, "What's wrong with this couple? We don't go to their residence for fear of offending them, but they keep coming to our place one after another." After saying this, she felt that her words were too harsh and it would be bad if word of this reached Lu Heng's ears, so she added, "It's Zhongibo's residence that's so considerate." That's right. The other madams also agreed, but whether or not they were sincere was another matter. The sound of voices came from the corridor, and the door to the private room was pushed open. The bridegroom, dressed in a red python robe, walked in. When Lu Heng was toasting in the residence, he had been forced to drink quite a bit. After walking for a while, he was already tipsy and felt a bit dizzy as he walked. The two servants at his side dutifully followed him to prevent him from making a fool of himself. Lu Heng didn't even have to look for Qin Yining. Her eyes, which were slightly moist due to drunkenness, fell directly on Qin Yining. In the room full of plain colors, Qin Yining was still the most eye-catching one. His elegant attire made him seem even more ethereal. Under the light, his soft and tender skin was like fine porcelain, glowing with a soft matte light. His eyebrows were like distant mountains, and he was as white as snow. The emotions that Lu Heng had been suppressing were like a flood breaking through a dam. For the sake of the big picture, he had no choice but to accept Your Majesty's matchmaking and marry a woman he didn't have any feelings for. He didn't know much about Bien Ruohan, and he didn't have any feelings for him. After meeting him, he only felt that he was an ordinary woman. Just now, he was still suppressing the disappointment in his heart and smiling as he prepared to go fetch the bride. However, the people he arranged at Shorenfu restaurant told him that Bien Ruohan actually dared to cause trouble for Qin Yining in front of him. His words were extremely vulgar, and he made a big fool of himself. Lu Heng was so angry that he almost cancelled the wedding on the spot. However, the words of the tactician beside him reminded him. The wedding had been prepared and the invitations had been sent out. This was a marriage that Your Majesty was the matchmaker. Even if Bien Ruohan was a vulgar and arrogant person, there was no reason for him to go back on his word now that he had agreed. Lu Heng suppressed his anger and bowed to Bien Ruohan. He walked through the crowd of guests to show proper etiquette and then hurried over. He knew that Qin Yining had been wronged, because between him and Qin Yining, it had always been Qin Yining who was the only one who had ever been close to her. She had scrupulously adhered to the virtues of a woman and treated Pang Xiao wholeheartedly. He was the one who couldn't let go of her. However, Bien Ruohan had somehow heard something and dared to say such words in front of so many upper-class women in the capital. "Greetings, madams." Lu Heng forced himself to retract his gaze and bowed. "Please forgive us for our lack of hospitality. Zhongibo is too courteous." Everyone was talking at once as they invited Lu Heng to sit down. These upper-class women had just watched a big show. Before they could sort out their thoughts, Lu Heng had arrived. Moreover, as soon as he entered, his gaze had been fixed on the Prince Zhongxian's consort. It was difficult for everyone not to be curious. An older madam smiled and said, "Marquis Lu is a thoughtful and attentive person. He treats his guests with great care. However, Madame Zhongibo, I think that after marrying into the family, she will be influenced by your family's culture and will be better." Her words were very impolite. She directly belittled Bien Ruohan's family in front of Lu Heng. Even if a man didn't like his wife, in front of outsiders, they were still family. Belittling his wife was the same as belittling him. If it was a normal day, Lu Heng would also think this way. However, Lu Heng was currently drunk. In addition, his heart was filled with regret and pity for Qin Yining. He was also afraid that Qin Yining wouldn't want to pay attention to him anymore. This madam's words coincided with his thoughts. Lu Heng agreed and said, "That's right. Today is my wife's fault. On her wedding day, She didn't pay attention to the rules and snuck out. She even spoke nonsense without any basis and offended everyone. This one feels very guilty. After saying this, Lu Heng stood up and bowed apologetically in the direction of Qin Yining. Although there were many people sitting next to Qin Yining, Lu Heng's straightforward apology still caused the madams present to whisper to each other. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that this Master Lu had clearly come to apologize to Qin Yining. Lu Heng turned around and whispered a few words to the manservant beside him. The manservant hesitated. Just as he was about to call out, "Master Lu," he was stopped by Lu Heng. "Why aren't you going?" "Yes." The manservant retreated and went to the door to give a few instructions. Not long after, he brought in a tray with a jar of wine and a small bowl for eating. Lu Heng picked up the jar of wine and opened the mud seal, then poured himself a bowl of wine. "Today's matter was all due to my lack of consideration. That's why my wife came and acted so impudently. I will punish myself with 3 bowls. Please forgive me, madams." As soon as Lu Heng finished speaking, he happily downed 3 bowls of wine in one go. With such a ferocious drinking style, even if these madams still had complaints about Bian Ruohan, they couldn't blame Lu Heng anymore. At least Zhong Yibor had given them enough face. His apology was also quite sincere. In contrast, Lu Heng's thoughtfulness and politeness and Bian Ruohan's arrogance and rudeness were 2 polar opposites. Although these madams hadn't competed in the center of power for a long time, what didn't they know? This kind of woman really wasn't worthy of Lu Heng. Lu Heng probably had no choice but to agree to marry her. Some of the older madams smiled and tried to smooth things over. "All right, we've already eaten so much wine. We still have to consummate our marriage tonight. Zhong Yibor, sit down and rest. Let them serve some hangover soup." Their words warmed up the originally tense and awkward atmosphere. Lu Heng smiled and sat down. He took the hangover soup and placed it next to his hand. At this time, his face was flushed and his stomach was full of wine. How could he drink any hangover soup? At this time, he felt his entire body was hot and his face was burning. It was only because of his good habits and family upbringing that he didn't lose his composure. But his eyes couldn't help but drift towards Qin Yining. At this time, someone sighed emotionally. I still remember that in Xi'an Palace, the Empress Dowager almost matched Zhong Yibor and Wang Fei together. But the heavens have their own plans. Yu Laro's red line has tied Prince Zhongshiren and family Qin Meimei's feet together. Qin Yining was already impatient. These women, who were not very familiar with her, were from a completely different world from her. They were not willing to rest when they had nothing to do, and talked about the matters of their own families as a pastime. In addition, the older women were even more unscrupulous in their jokes. It was not easy to put the matter aside, but they actually brought it up again. Lu Heng thought of the scene when he first met Qin Yining. Then he thought of the situation in the palace and the few times they had crossed swords. They had gone through hardships together in the Taiten. She had once thought of him as a friend. But what was going on now? Lu Heng's mind was dizzy. Everything around him had receded. There was only Qin Yining left in his eyes. He smiled bitterly. His eyes were filled with disappointment and reluctance. Actually, back then, Lu Heng hadn't finished speaking when his face suddenly turned cold. Qin Yining splashed a cup of herbal tea on his face. He suddenly stood up and scolded, "Zhong Yibor, wake up. Don't speak nonsense to ruin other people's reputation. Did the 2 of you make an agreement?" The room was completely silent. The madam who had been joking saw that Qin Yining was angry and knew that she had said something wrong. She had angered this Wang Fei. But no one would have thought that the Prince Zhongshian's consort had such a violent temper. She dared to splash tea on the face of the head of the Lu family. The tea was still stuck to Lu Heng's eyebrows. Lu Heng was slightly dazed. Qin Yining turned to the people in the room and said with a smile, "The day is late. My family's Wang Yi is not feeling well and has been resting in bed. I have also been out all day. It is time for me to leave." "Yes, it is late." The Countess of Anping, who had noticed that the situation wasn't right, agreed. "I should also go back." When the 2 mentioned this, The awkward crowd stood to bid farewell to Lu Heng. At this time, Lu Heng's head was spinning. He couldn't even straighten his tongue. He couldn't hear a single word that these people were saying. These madams saw that Lu Heng was so drunk that he was delirious. Moreover, he had brought his attendants and bodyguards, so they were reassured and bid farewell. Soon, only Lu Heng and his attendants were left in the private room. Count, you. Before the manservant could finish speaking, Lu Heng closed his eyes and fell to the ground drunk. His mouth was open as he fell asleep. The manservant and bodyguards were extremely shocked. They hurriedly went to support him, but the drunk person was completely unconscious. Not only was his snoring loud, he was also much heavier than usual. Everyone used a tremendous amount of strength to carry Lu Heng out of Shun Fu restaurant with a roll of bedding. They placed him on a temporarily hired carriage. Fortunately, the Count's estate wasn't far from here. The family quickly drove the carriage back to the Count's estate and directly carried the drunken Lu Heng into the bridal chamber. At this time, Bien Ruohan was sitting on the side of the bed with a dragon and phoenix veil over her head. She was extremely bashful as she waited for Lu Heng, who knew that her neck was about to be crushed by the phoenix coronet. What she waited for was the groom who had passed out drunk. Lu Heng was directly carried onto the bed. He didn't even take off his wedding robes as he continued to sleep, snoring loudly. Bien Ruohan didn't know if she should continue to sit on the bed or avoid it. She had never suffered any grievances since she was young. The wedding night was so different from what she had imagined. She was so angry that she threw the veil on the ground and turned to leave. "Madam, please get some rest." "No, I want to go home." "Madam, if you go out at this time, I'm afraid it will affect you negatively. If concubine Zhuang knows, she will reprimand this servant for not serving Madam well. Please rest for the time being." Bien Ruohan was forcefully dissuaded by the wet nurse who had accompanied her. The wedding night was not going to happen. She curled up in her wedding robes and slept next to Lu Heng. She also couldn't get used to the pungent smell of alcohol. She hid far away and sulked by herself. She even shed a few tears of grievance. Regardless of the Lu family's situation, Qin Yining had already told Pang Xiao about today's strange encounter. That Bien She is really unreasonable. I don't know what Zhong Ibor's brain is filled with either. I didn't even feel relieved when I threw a bowl of herbal tea at her. Chapter 919. Qin Yining was amused by his tone and burst out laughing. "If it was really hot tea, I'm afraid it would burn him. Do you feel sorry for him?" Pang Xiao snorted unhappily. "I'm just afraid that things will get out of hand and it will damage our reputation." Pang Xiao naturally knew that Qin Yining had a sense of propriety. She was not only doing this for her reputation, but also because she did not want to cause more trouble and fall out with the Lu family at an inappropriate time. However, she was his precious treasure that he was afraid of dropping and melting in his mouth. She had only been out for a day and she was already being bullied. Moreover, it was Zhong Ibor and his wife who ganged up on her. I don't think that group of women are easy to deal with. I don't know if they are doing it on purpose or not, but they are only trying to cause trouble. How can ordinary women with virtue speak so carelessly? They are even the matriarchs of noble families. Pang Xiao looked down on the noble women present today. To put it bluntly, these women only cared about gossiping about others behind their backs. They didn't think about how others would be criticized. They wouldn't take responsibility for their own words. Especially the woman who deliberately brought up the matter of the Empress Dowager matchmaking Lu Heng and Qin Yining. She was obviously up to no good and deliberately led the topic in that direction. Pang Xiao subconsciously wondered if there was someone who did not get along with her, so she framed Qin Yining. But on second thought, sometimes the hostility between women often came from jealousy. Perhaps someone was jealous of his sister Yi's beauty. Who knows? Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining even tighter with her big hands. Don't care about them. Anyway, let's not interact with those gossipy women in the future, so as not to make you angry. I know. Qin Yining hugged Pang Xiao's neck and buried her face in his neck. Okay, let's just forget about it. It has nothing to do with us. Don't take it to heart. That won't do. Qin Yining lowered his head and planted a kiss on Qin Yining's forehead. I think that Mr. Liu is clearly not giving up on his evil intentions. He bullied my wife. Do you think a cup of herbal tea will resolve the matter? Don't worry about it. I'll think about it. A jealous man was not someone to be trifled with. All right, all right, all right. I'll do as you say. I won't interfere. Qin Yining's voice was soft. He covered his mouth and yawned. It's more tiring to talk to those unfamiliar people for a whole day than to fight a battle. Hearing this, Pang Xiao's big hands massaged her shoulders and neck. His hands did not feel much flesh, only a layer of skin wrapped around bones. Well, I've asked them to prepare milk and bird's nest for you. Eat a bowl, and we'll go to bed. Pang Xiao said lovingly, I promise I won't torture you tonight. The first half of the sentence was still fine, but the second half started to be frivolous again. Qin Yining hit Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao laughed loudly and hugged her. He didn't know how to dote on such a big darling. After a good night's sleep, the next day, Qin Yining and Pang Xiao stayed at home to recuperate as usual. They gradually started to decline the few visitors. Pang Xiao secretly went out. Qin Yining didn't ask what he was going to do. Wang Fei, Wang Fei. In the evening, Bing Tang said excitedly, did you know? Yesterday, Madame Zhong Yibor followed Zhong Yibor into the palace to thank him for his grace. In the end, they made a big fuss at Xi'an Palace and disturbed the Empress. Really? Qin Yining was making Zhao Ji-er's little clothes. Hearing this, he said with interest, with her temper, she'll probably suffer in the palace. Not only that. Bing Tang lowered his voice and said, I heard that Madame Zhong Yibor went to complain. She said that Zhong Yibor humiliated her. On their wedding night, the two didn't even take off their wedding clothes. You can even hear this. Qin Yining was shocked. Bing Tang said with embarrassment, I'm not the only one who said it. The woman who went out to buy today came back and said it. She said that it has spread throughout the entire capital. Ji Yun came in with a box and heard Bing Tang say, isn't that so? Wang Fei, you don't know. Zhong Yibor is such a big shot from an aristocratic family. It's not easy for him to remarry, but it happened to be that kind of person. Now, many people outside are talking about this matter. Supposedly, the people of Zhong Yibor's Fu are fierce and rude. They offended the Empress Dowager and the Empress. Later, Your Majesty was alerted. Your Majesty reprimanded Zhong Yibor's madam. Even the favored Zhuang Pin suffered and was almost demoted to Jiaoyi. TSK, if I were Zhuang Pin, even if I had a marriage alliance, I wouldn't choose a cousin with such a temperament. Bing Tang clicked his tongue, wouldn't letting her out cause trouble for herself. Zhuang Pin probably has a weak temperament, right? Supposedly, if it wasn't for Zhuang Pin's delicate beauty, and someone who stands aloof from worldly affairs, Your Majesty would have let her off. The Bian family would have lost a lot of face. Qin Yining listened to the two Yatu chatter and thought of Bian Ruohan's appearance. He couldn't help but shake his head. Her life was too good, and her parents and elders spoiled her. That was why she was such a girl. But this couldn't be blamed on her parents. There were many parents in the world who spoiled their children. Not all of their children were like Bian Ruohan. Qin Yining shook his head. She didn't take this matter to heart. Pang Xiao didn't bring this matter up again. He continued to claim that he was ill and recuperated. He left the court. 2 days passed like this. There was another rumor in the Bian Fu. Supposedly, when Biansha returned home, she was punished to kneel in the ancestral hall and wasn't even given food. Zhong Yibor also returned after a short while. He left Biansha at her maternal home and didn't stay at his father-in-law's home to eat. A big wedding that caused such discord. This rumor was too widespread. It overshadowed many of the rumors on the day of the wedding. Now, Zhong Yibor had married an unruly shrew. Everyone knew about it. Because of the rumors that Your Majesty treated meritorious officials harshly and bullied great heroes, now it wasn't just Prince Zhongshiren who was treated harshly by Your Majesty. Many people in the streets were talking about it. Zhong Yibor's marriage was set up by Your Majesty. No matter what kind of woman Your Majesty set up, It wouldn't be good for a subject to refuse, right? That's why the patriarch of a big family like the Liu family, who also has a noble title, married such a shrew. Could this also be, some people didn't dare to say more, but everyone understood the unspoken words. It was easy to associate this matter with the harsh treatment Prince Zhongshuren received when he returned to the city. It was obvious that Your Majesty's harsh treatment of his subjects wasn't accidental. It's said that Prince Zhongshuren is still miserably recuperating in the prince's mansion. Your Majesty hasn't given Prince Zhongshuren an official position. An official position? It's good enough that he hasn't been impeached. It's only been a few days. Who knows when a basin of shit will be thrown at him again? The person who spoke sighed. This kind of rumor didn't exist only in the city. People were saying it almost everywhere. Li Chitian quickly received the news. Your Majesty, this subject's words are true. Those ignorant commoners are indeed spreading this kind of rumor. As an imperial censor, it is this subject's duty to report the truth to Your Majesty. In the imperial study, a middle-aged official knelt on the ground and spoke righteously. Li Chitian naturally trusted him. This person was his trusted aide and had been very steady in his work for many years. Although he didn't have a meteoric rise, he had relied on his own ability to rise through the ranks in the imperial censorate. Minister Liu, you may rise. Thank you, Your Majesty. Imperial censor Liu stood up with an upright appearance. He didn't even look at Li Chitian's expression as he continued, "This subject has another matter to report to Your Majesty." Li Chitian rubbed his forehead. "Speak." Imperial censor Liu said, "This subject has discovered that Zhong Ibor is privately selling official positions and titles to fill his own pockets. The officials who sell them clearly mark the price, and there are even times when the highest bidder wins. For example, the imperial envoy that was sent to the old capital of Dian, Sir Lu, was an official position that Zhong Ibor sold." That one sentence was like a sudden clap of thunder, truly shocking the people who heard it. For a moment, the imperial study was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. When Xiong Jinshui and the other servants heard this, they were so scared that they didn't dare to make a sound. They quietly hid in a corner, afraid that Your Majesty would notice them. Imperial censor Liu, who had lit the firecracker, was still standing there like a pine tree. Li Chitian's head throbbed with pain. Impossible. Lu Tingzhong was personally arranged by us. No matter how capable Lu Heng is, how could he make us listen to his every word? Not to mention this imperial envoy, just the appointments, evaluations, and promotions of officials above the level of county magistrate were all personally approved by us. You said that the Liu family sold official positions? Could it be that they fed us a bewitching potion to make us agree? Your Majesty, this subject didn't mean that. However, it is an indisputable fact that the Liu family sold official positions. There were people in the Liu family who deceived Your Majesty, and there were also people who deliberately led Your Majesty to succeed in profiting from this. Imperial censor Liu thought for a moment, then said, "This subject will give a concrete example. A few days ago, there was a merchant in the south. In order for their business to prosper, they wanted a reliable official to take care of them. However, the local officials were tough, so they thought of a way to buy a local imperial envoy. This way, they could run amok without any hindrance. This merchant begged the Liu family, and the Liu family completed the task of buying the imperial envoy. However, the merchant refused to pay the promised revenge to the Liu family. It was said that they didn't give the Liu family a single copper coin, and even ordered people to freeload in the Liu family for a long time. The Liu family completed the task, but they didn't receive any money. In a fit of anger, they tormented the merchant until he closed down. This subject dares to speak bluntly in front of Your Majesty today. The Liu family sold an imperial envoy, that is, official Liu's position, but they didn't receive any revenge from the merchant. Not only did they destroy the merchant, but they definitely won't be satisfied. They will only be satisfied when the position of imperial envoy is taken back." Li Chitian's brows furrowed as he listened. "You're saying that the Liu family will try to influence us and have us replace Lu Tingzhong?" Imperial censor Liu said, "Whether it is true or not, Your Majesty will slowly find out. Li Chitian knew that Imperial Censor Liu wasn't someone who spoke without thinking. At this time, he was somewhat skeptical. At the beginning of the 4th month, it was time for the official political examination. Coincidentally, someone from the Ministry of Personnel just happened to send a memorial to Li Chitian, saying that the inspection of Lu Tingzhong, who was the imperial envoy in the south, should have been completed and that he could be transferred back to his original position. He explained the reason in the memorial and asked for Li Chitian's approval. In the past, there were many appointments and removals of officials that were sent in memorials like this by the Ministry of Personnel, and Li Chitian personally reviewed them. Chapter 920. Li Chitian was cautious in his actions, so he naturally would not easily believe anyone. However, the timing of this report was too coincidental. Even though Li Chitian did not want to believe that the Lu family would sell an official position, he still had doubts in his heart. Other people did not know, but when Lu Tingzhong went to the south, he used the name of inspecting the people to monitor Pang Xiao. In private, Li Chitian had also arranged other things for him to do. If Lu Tingzhong bought an official position to become an imperial envoy, then it was too scary when one thought about it carefully. Li Chitian was full of gloominess. With a wave of his pen, he rejected the Ministry of Personnel's report. Who would have thought that after this report was rejected once, it was submitted again not long after? Li Chitian rejected it again, and the Ministry of Personnel continued to submit it. They actually submitted 3 reports in a row for this matter. At this time, Li Chitian's face was already dark. He viciously marked down the Lu family in his heart. What a good Lu Heng, daring to play with me. After the Qingming festival, Pang Xiao's health finally improved with each passing day. After returning to the capital to rest for a month, Prince Zhongshiren finally attended the court assembly. When Li Chitian saw Pang Xiao attending court and standing among the civil officials, he felt a bit angry in his heart. He suppressed his anger and said a few words of concern. The rumors outside about him harshly treating a meritorious official had just subsided. Li Chitian really did not want to cause any more trouble. Therefore, regarding Pang Xiao's position after returning to the capital, he needed to carefully consider it. Li Chitian absent-mindedly listened to the officials discuss the matter. He had not yet thought about where to place Pang Xiao when Duke Chang stood up again. Your Majesty, this official wants to report Prince Zhongshiren. Duke Chang's report of impeaching Pang Xiao was old news. During this period of time, it would be impeached every few days. Each time, Li Chitian would only say pending investigation. However, today, Duke Chang and the officials seemed to have made an agreement. Not only did they talk about the previous reports in rapid succession, it was as if they had made an agreement. Someone even shouted, Prince Zhongshiren appears to be a loyal subject, but in fact, he is a scoundrel. He is disrespectful to Your Majesty and deliberately created rumors and slanders among the people to slander Your Majesty. He really deserves to be punished. Prince Zhongshiren was ordered to guard the south. During this period of time, there was no chaos in the south. He was just doing his duty. Even so, he still dares to claim credit and even incite people to claim credit for himself. He is just trying to force Your Majesty to give him a higher position. For the sake of his career, this person is simply unscrupulous. In terms of court affairs, he did not have any achievements. In terms of character, he was truly despicable and hateful. How could such a person be worthy of staying in the capital? We need to let him reflect on himself before we can use him. As soon as he said this, the hall fell silent. Many people's eyes were focused on Pang Xiao. In the past, Pang Xiao claimed that he was sick and did not attend court. If there were any reports, he could only let them do as they wished. Now that Pang Xiao was present, those who agreed with Pang Xiao were anxious in their hearts. They were thinking about how Pang Xiao would explain himself. These officials who supported Pang Xiao knew that Pang Xiao was not a soft persimmon that could be easily squashed. Since he was framed, he naturally had to defend himself. They could finally vent their anger. However, unexpectedly, Pang Xiao kept his mouth shut and lowered his head respectfully as if he was admitting his guilt. This surprised everyone, including Li Chitian. It also made the officials even more excited. They all came up with ideas on how to punish Pang Xiao. It was as if Duke Chang had been injected with chicken blood. He spoke as if he had pushed a cart of walnuts. He did not even pant in the middle. I agree. I think that Prince Zhengxian's actions are not worthy of the word loyal. He has betrayed your Majesty's grace. Why don't we let Prince Zhengxian reflect on himself? Now that the world is stable, Huichuan County should start construction. We lack a premier to supervise the construction. I think that Prince Zhengxian is qualified for this position. Let Prince Zhengxian supervise the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum to atone for his sins. He can also have time to reflect on his sins. The eyes of the officials lit up and they all agreed. On the other hand, the officials who supported Pang Xiao were cursing Duke Chang in their hearts. This old man was really vicious. The imperial envoys who supervised the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum in the past did not have a good ending. Duke Chang was pushing Pang Xiao to his death. Some people could not help but stand up to refute. Prince Zhengxian is a meritorious official and has outstanding talent. Your Majesty will definitely put him in an important position. Let Prince Zhengxian do the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum. Isn't it overkill? Naturally, the officials were not convinced. The scene became chaotic. The officials argued until they could not stop. Only Pang Xiao, the person involved, remained silent. At this time, Li Chitian's thoughts were turning. Actually, he also had a headache about participating in Pang Xiao. It was all because he wanted to see a joke in the beginning. That was why he allowed Duke Chang to lead people to mess around. He did not stop Pang Xiao the first time. Later, he did not clear Pang Xiao's name. In the future, he did not have a chance to offend Pang Xiao. Not to mention, Li Chitian still felt uncomfortable. Li Chitian had been worried about Pang Xiao's appointment. His original intention was to not give him a chance to take power. However, the public opinion outside was very strong. If he did not give him a position, it would confirm the rumor that he mistreated his loyal officials. In such a dilemma, Duke Chang proposed to have Pang Xiao be the imperial envoy supervising the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum. This made Li Chitian's eyes light up. It could keep Pang Xiao away from the center of power. It could also catch his mistakes at any time. It could also prevent him from causing trouble in front of him. If word got out, he would build the Imperial Mausoleum for him. That was an arrangement he made because he trusted Pang Xiao a lot. For Pang Xiao, it was also a kind of glory. It was killing two birds with one stone. Thinking of this, Pang Xiao put down a stone in his heart. His finger tapped happily on the armrest of the dragon chair. The officials below continued to argue happily. Li Chitian looked at them like he was watching a monkey show. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Lu Heng. Li Chitian immediately had a new idea, daring to play him like a monkey and buy officials and nobles to control the court. It was time for Lu Heng to teach him a lesson. Ahem. Li Chitian coughed lightly. When the loyal officials heard this, they froze for a moment. They immediately shut their mouths. The court immediately returned to silence. Li Chitian said, "Jishi. Your Majesty." Pang Xiao saluted. The construction of Huichuan County has been stopped for a long time. Jin indeed needs a trustworthy person to be the imperial envoy supervising the construction. Jin will give this task to you. The officials in the court were so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. The generals who were arguing fiercely with the censors who impeached Pang Xiao were indignant. Someone wanted to stand up for Pang Xiao, who knew that Pang Xiao would be the first to salute. Without any objection, he respectfully and fearfully replied, "This official obeys your Majesty." "Thank your Majesty for your grace." Li Chitian smiled and nodded. He said again, "Zhongibo." Lu Heng lowered his head and thought about Li Chitian's actions today. He was stunned for a moment when he was suddenly called. He hurriedly stood up and saluted, "This official is here." Jin attaches great importance to the construction of Huichuan County. Since Prince Zhengxian is the premier supervising the construction, the position of county magistrate will be given to you. You and Prince Zhongshiren are both Shen's trusted officials. Presumably, the two of you will be able to cooperate and work together to complete this matter. Lu Heng was shocked to the extreme. Ever since the Lu family secretly supported Li Qitian's uprising, it had been more than 10 years. The Daeju dynasty had been established for 8 years. The Lu family had always been in power and he gradually gained Li Qitian's trust. Lu Heng was confident that among the nobles in the court, there was no one who could win the emperor's heart more than him. But who would have thought that your majesty would suddenly let him be a small county magistrate of Huichuan County? Moreover, the task was to repair the imperial mausoleum, which was a strenuous and thankless task. One must know that many county magistrates of Huichuan County had died consecutively. Lu Heng's heart was uneasy and unconvinced. But from the corner of his eye, he saw that Pang Xiao, such a domineering figure, was now as obedient as a cat. He actually agreed to be the premier supervising the construction of the imperial mausoleum without any objection. It was clear that the current situation was serious. He knew that your majesty had always been afraid of Pang Xiao. But if even someone like Pang Xiao was obedient and he stood up to refute, regardless of your majesty's considerations, he would only make your majesty even more dissatisfied. After thinking 1,000 times, Lu Heng finally knelt down and saluted. This official thanks your majesty for your kindness. This official will do his best to share your majesty's burdens. Millimeter Li Qitian responded with a drawn-out sound. Because of these two people's obedience, Li Qitian was in a good mood. He was also a little afraid that his appointment today would be talked about behind his back. Therefore, Li Qitian added, Zhishi's body has not recovered yet, so there's no rush to take up the post. It won't be too late for you to set off after you've recovered. The imperial mausoleum matters will be handed over to these two beloved officials. The two of you can discuss and set off. Thank you very much for your majesty. This official obeys your majesty's orders. Pang Xiao responded with a neat salute. Li Qitian then expressed his sympathy to Lu Heng. Zhong Ibor is a newlywed. You should also take up the post with your family. Yes, this official thanks your majesty for his grace. Li Qitian's mood became even better after completing this matter. He was still smiling even when he returned to the imperial study after the court was dismissed. Not to mention how Pang Xiao and Lu Heng would make arrangements for their departure when they returned home separately. The news that Prince Zhongshiren and Zhong Ibor were about to set off together to build the imperial mausoleum spread throughout the imperial court in the blink of an eye. The commoners' discussion was one thing. After all, they were far away from power struggles and did not know much about the imperial court's matters. However, the people who worked in the imperial court all saw this with their own eyes. In the Tiger Army, who worshipped Pang Xiao, several of the main generals were filled with righteous indignation when they heard this news. Who would have thought that Wang Yi would risk his life to fight so many long battles for your majesty? In the end, he would end up going to build the imperial mausoleum. Damn it! What kind of official is building the imperial mausoleum? Ah! Isn't this using a butcher's knife to poke an ant? Most importantly, I've seen very few officials who build the imperial mausoleum end up well. This is trying to torture Wang Yi to death. Everyone was indignant, but there were also some who remained clear-headed and tried to persuade the furious people around them. All right. Everyone, don't make a ruckus. If others hear about this, I'm afraid it will cause trouble for Wang Yi. Wang Yi is wholeheartedly loyal to your majesty. Naturally, he will happily accept the edict. If we say this and someone with ulterior motives hears about it, they will slander Wang Yi for being dissatisfied with your majesty. Then wouldn't Wang Yi be even more wronged? Although that's the case, your majesty is too. You're still talking. Why aren't you shutting up? Several people reminded each other, afraid that trouble would come from careless talk. However, even the one who maintained his rationality and stopped others was also furious. Since ancient times, there was a saying that the hound was cooked after the cunning hare was served. How long had it been since the establishment of the Daeju dynasty? Getting rid of the donkey after it had left the millstone was too fast. Chapter 9:21. At this time, Xiaoyu and Xu Weiji were also gathered in the study in the outer courtyard of the Wang estate with a few strategists, waiting for Pang Xiao and Qin Yining. Everyone's expressions were very serious. They originally thought that Pang Xiao had made great contributions in the south. Now that the new southern Yang emperor, Yu Qichuan, was young and ignorant, and was surrounded by powerful officials, they would be busy with internal affairs for a long time and would not dare to take the initiative to disturb the border. Although Pang Xiao had indeed delayed his return to the capital, this was insignificant compared to Pang Xiao's contributions. Who would have thought that Your Majesty would actually not care about feelings or contributions and arrange this kind of official position for Pang Xiao? This clearly showed that he wanted to take advantage of the situation to harm Pang Xiao. The national treasury was empty, and the construction of the imperial mausoleum had been interrupted several times for various reasons. To put it bluntly, it was a lack of manpower and money. Even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. This kind of situation, no matter who it was, they would have to face a huge mess. If Pang Xiao took office, the situation would not improve at all. When the time came, wouldn't they be able to casually find a mistake and pin a crime on Pang Xiao? Xiaoyu was both angry and sighed. Who would have thought that such a heroic figure like Wang Yi, who had risked his life for the imperial court for so many years, would actually fall to such a state now? The strategists also sighed. Pang Xiao trusted them greatly and had never treated them unfairly. Seeing that Pang Xiao was about to fall to such a state, everyone felt bad. Xu Weiji said regretfully, Wang Yi is a magnanimous person, but he is always misunderstood and guarded against. Now, Wang Yi has already been given the position of an official who has to take the blame at any time. If Wang Yi does not react, I'm afraid that the situation will become even more severe in the future. Xu Weiji's words were tactful, but everyone present was smart. The content of his hint was very clear. Xu Weiji supported Pang Xiao to make early preparations. Xiaoyu nodded slightly and swept his gaze across the people present. He carefully observed everyone's reactions and memorized them. Xiaoyu and Xu Weiji were often together. The two understood each other and participated in some secret matters, so they could trust each other. However, they could not completely trust Pang Xiao's strategists. Therefore, they could use this chance that Wang Yi and Wang Fei had not yet arrived. If anyone had any ill intentions, they could be caught early. Even if they could not, even if they had disagreements, they could be caught. If they did not, they could be caught. If they did not agree, they could be caught. After chatting for a while, Pang Xiao and Qin Yining arrived. Hearing the footsteps outside, they all stood up and bowed respectfully. No need for formalities. Everyone, please sit down. Pang Xiao held Qin Yining's hand and sat with her at the head of the table. He smiled and said, Today, I invited everyone here to inform you that Your Majesty has issued an imperial edict. This king is about to go to Huichuan County to supervise the construction of the imperial mausoleum. When this king's health improves, he will set off. Everyone has followed this king around for so many years. The environment in Huichuan County is not good. If anyone has other arrangements or wants to retire, you can come and find this king in private later. No one expected that at the most critical moment, Pang Xiao would give everyone a chance to withdraw from the camp. Pang Xiao was afraid that his dangerous situation would drag them down, right? The strategists, including Xiaoyu and Xu Weiji, couldn't help but be moved. People's hearts were made of flesh. The reason why they followed Pang Xiao was because Pang Xiao knew how to make good use of people. He gave them a space to use their fists and feet. He never put on airs and trusted them very much. Now, Pang Xiao was in the most difficult situation. If he left now, how could he have the face to see his former brothers again? Thinking of this, Xiaoyu and Xu Weiji stood up and bowed respectfully. This old man will do his best for Wang Yi. Pang Xiao smiled and said, Good. This king would also like to thank everyone. So, everyone, please make early preparations. When this king's health improves, you can set off. Yes. Everyone responded in unison. Pang Xiao chatted with everyone for a while more before calling them to disperse. Qin Yining and Pang Xiao returned to the inner residence hand in hand. It was the time of spring and new greenery could be seen everywhere. The willow branches had sprouted tender shoots and the grass was covered with unknown small flowers. Not to mention the potted flowers that could be seen everywhere in the residence. Qin Yining looked at the tranquil and peaceful scenery and sighed softly. We have only stayed for a few days and we have to go to Huichuan County again. At that time, we will be so busy that we won't have the time to pay attention to the surrounding scenery. Pang Xiao lowered his eyes. From his angle, he could see Qin Yining's soft and long hair tied up in a bun. The pearl flower tassel hairpin swayed slightly as she walked, shining with a gentle and elegant pearl light. Pang Xiao could finally say what he had been holding in his heart for several days. Sister Yi, actually, I have thought about it carefully these days. The matter of Huichuan County can be settled by Mr. Xie and the others. I also have a lot of people under me. You want me to stay? Qin Yining stopped and looked up at Pang Xiao expressionlessly. He was someone who was not afraid of thousands of soldiers and horses before, but now, he was trembling and tongue-tied from being stared at by a little girl. He even didn't know how to explain himself. He cared so much about Qin Yining, how could he bear to make her angry? How could he let her misunderstand him? I just feel that, Jishi, you forgot what we discussed before again. Why do you want to hide me in a place where there is no one when something happens? Why don't you think that I am not those weak girls who can fight side by side with you and won't drag you down and even help you? I know, I have always known. Pang Xiao's voice was a little hurried. She held Qin Yining's hands and said, I never said that you would drag me down. I also know that you are not an ordinary weak girl. Because you are by my side, many of my problems can be solved easily. It can be said that with you around, I am like a tiger that has grown wings. Then why did you have this idea again? Are you afraid that you will not be able to return from this trip to Huichuan? Qin Yining's words hit the nail on the head. Pang Xiao couldn't find any words to refute and could only say, Sister Yi, it's fine if others don't know, but you know that the treasure is hidden there. Paper can't hide the truth. If there is any change, it will lead to a fatal disaster. Moreover, Guan Dahu and Liu Ban aren't very intelligent people. Although they want to keep the treasure for themselves, they might accidentally sell us all out. I alone will be enough there. You really don't need to take the risk. Qin Yining's white fingers tapped Pang Xiao's shoulder. I will say this for the last time. You and I are companions who have fought side by side. I don't accept your proposal. In addition, I have also thought of a proper way to find out the truth of the treasure first. I plan to set off for Huichuan County first, just like when we entered the capital. No, Sister Yi, why not? I entered the capital first. What danger did I encounter? Pang Xiao was speechless for a moment and shook her head. Qin Yining said again, or did I do something wrong and ruin your plan? How could it be? Pang Xiao said anxiously, didn't you do a great job? Even Mr. Xie and the others praised you behind your back a lot. They said that you're a rare female zhuge in the world and that your ability to see 10 steps ahead of you has reached perfection. They all have to admit defeat. Qin Yining's tense expression eased a little. I'm not a female zhuge, but I do have some ideas about this matter. You don't have to get involved first. In addition, I will go to Huichuan County first, not to the dragon's lair or the tiger's den. I will go first alone. You will bring some people and set off with Lu Heng later. In this way, there won't be many people who will notice me. Moreover, I am a woman. Will they think that a woman can do anything? Sister Yi, I know that you are smart. You have encountered danger several times, but you can rely on your smart strategy to survive. This is indeed very amazing, but you can't rely on luck. How can I rely on luck? I am sure that nothing will happen. Qin Yining said seriously, this time, give me a few bodyguards. I will bring Bing Tang and Ji Yun and set off first with my belongings. Tell your majesty and the courtiers that you arrange for me to go to Huichuan County to buy a house and tidy it up a little. You have just taken office and don't know how long you will stay in Huichuan County. It makes sense for us to buy a house. Moreover, your body has not recovered, so it is suitable for me to go. Whether it is for outsiders or your subordinates, this is the best decision. Pang Xiao had to admit that Qin Yining's analysis was correct. However, although he knew logically, Pang Xiao could not bear to let Qin Yining go no matter what. He had previously proposed to let Qin Yining avoid danger several times because he was so arrogant sometimes. He always felt that people would only be safe if they were under his watch. However, if they really entered the tiger's den, he was also afraid that Qin Yining would be implicated. He did not expect that this girl not only did not agree, but also made an even more outrageous request. Qin Yining said, "Jishi, now is not the time to let your emotions affect your decisions. If I go to buy a house and use the princess consort's name, who will do anything to me? Those people want the treasure, not to act rashly and alert the enemy. They will be stupid to touch me. Because of this, it will be more convenient for me, a woman, to do things after I go." Qin Yining carefully explained the stakes to Pang Xiao again and finally said, "Don't forget that the two of us have no way out now. Of course, we don't have anything to worry about. You just have to do whatever you need to do. Don't miss the opportunity. Let's finish everything as soon as possible so that we can reunite with our family." Pang Xiao frowned and looked at Qin Yining. She felt distressed, guilty, worried, and helpless. "Sister Yi, you always make me speechless." "That's because my methods are good." Qin Yining thought for a while and said, "This time, I will let young Master Mu follow you. Just arrange some guards for me." Pang Xiao became anxious when she heard this. "No, I will only be at ease if Blockhead follows you." "Fool. Huichuan County is not dangerous for me, but the capital is a tiger's den for you. Who can predict the future? What if that person's brain goes haywire and he orders people to harm you? I will only have hope if you are alive. If you are gone, won't I be at the mercy of others?" Chapter 922. Pang Xiao looked at Qin Yining and could not find any words to refute him. Every time this happened, he hated his situation. Why did he have to face such a helpless situation every time? He did not have much ambition. What he hoped for was that. Pang Xiao turned around and stroked the loose hair on his forehead in annoyance. Qin Yining looked at Pang Xiao's tall back and sighed softly. He walked up to him, hugged him from behind, and pressed his face against his shoulder. "Jishi, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I won't risk my life for anything. I can swear to you." Pang Xiao pressed her soft and delicate body against his stiff body. He pursed his lips, turned around, and hugged her in his arms. "Sister Yi, I should have let you leave with father-in-law and the others." Qin Yining's voice was muffled in his arms. He smiled and said, "At that time, none of us could leave. If we left, wouldn't we be alerting the enemy?" Pang Xiao certainly knew that Qin Yining was telling the truth. Up until now, every time they encountered danger, they would choose the most appropriate way to deal with it. Many of them were the best way to deal with it at the moment. Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining and rearranged the current situation in his mind. Finally, he asked, "What do you plan to do after you go?" He was finally willing to listen to her plan and did not immediately stop her the moment she opened her mouth. Qin Yining told him her idea. "Sai Tong has a branch in Huichuan County. I will contact Sai Tong after I go. In addition, I will take the opportunity to investigate the local situation and find a way to contact Liu Ban, Guan Dahu, and the others. Now that your Majesty suddenly decreed that Zhong Yibor will be the county magistrate of Huichuan County, then Guan Dahu and the others will definitely not be able to buy official positions. Whether the money is wasted or not is secondary. The most important thing is that they have a guilty conscience. Once they know that you and Lu Heng are going to take office, they will definitely do something. They will definitely make a move and give me an opportunity to take advantage of it." Pang Xiao's eyes lit up when she heard this. She couldn't help but hug Qin Yining and sigh. "Mr. Shu and Mr. Xie have repeatedly praised you as a female Zhuge Liang. Who wouldn't be convinced by this? Even I have to be convinced." Qin Yining smiled and said, "That's because of the situation. There are too many eyes staring at you. In comparison, it'll be more convenient for me to do things. Let's do what we did when we entered the capital. I'll go and arrange everything. If there's anything we need to do together, I'll contact you. Pang Xiao nodded helplessly. I don't have any other way right now. Pang Xiao knew the situation he was in. Li Chitian was staring at him, his colleagues were staring at him, and the ministers of the various factions each had their own thoughts. In the past, when Qin Huayuan was in the imperial court, he was not only a stabilizing force that could stabilize a portion of the people, but he also had a keen insight into the direction of the wind. Although he had many people in his hands now, those people did not have Qin Huayuan's wisdom and sharpness. Many things happened in front of their eyes, but they did not notice. Therefore, he had to be on guard and pay attention to any movements. He also had to maintain the foundation that Qin Yining had helped him build among the people at all times. He could not let the people doubt or be disappointed in his words and actions. With his hands and feet tied, there were naturally many things that he could not do. Right now, there was no one else besides Qin Yining who could be so strategic and decisive. Forget it. Pang Xiao nodded helplessly. I only have one request. At any time, your life is the most important thing. You can't do stupid things just to help me fight for something. You have to put your life first. Seeing that Pang Xiao agreed, Qin Yining said with a smile, Don't worry, I know. Pang Xiao was very serious. Sister Yi, you have to promise me that you will never joke about your life. If you do anything that makes me feel that you are risking your life, I will ask Blockhead to help me send you to Sierre. Qin Yining met Pang Xiao's stern eyes and could not help but nod obediently. I know. I still want to go back and reunite with my family. I also made clothes for Brother Zhao and Brother Han. I can't bear to leave my family, and I can't bear to leave you. How can I risk my life? I cherish my life very much. Pang Xiao hugged Qin Yining tightly and kissed her temples several times. We have only been together for a short time, and now we have to separate again. It's just a temporary separation. Do you want to delay your trip to Huichuan County? I think Zhongyebo will never set off too late. Your Majesty said to show mercy by saying that we will set off when we are ready. It is just a polite sentence. If you really recover before you leave, the memorials accusing you of delaying the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum will fly like snowflakes. Pang Xiao was amused by Qin Yining's words. He rubbed her cheeks with his big hand. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly felt a drop of rain fall on the tip of his nose. The sky had turned grey at some point, and the rolling clouds were blown by a gust of wind. Qin Yining smiled and said, It's raining. Let's go back quickly. The two held hands and jogged. The rain poured down before the two of them returned to their room. Qin Yining was protected by Pang Xiao and carried a lot of rain. When they reached the corridor, the two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh when they saw each other's drenched appearance. After Qin Yining and Pang Xiao discussed, they prepared to set off. Pang Xiao arranged Tang Xiu and other Jinghu Wei to Qin Yining. He also sent Xie Yu to Qin Yining. Mr. Xie is outstanding in strategy and is good at making decisions. He is also proficient in disguise. With him by your side, I feel more at ease. Qin Yining persuaded Pang Xiao to leave Mu Jinghu behind to protect her. This time, it was naturally Pang Xiao's arrangement. She agreed to everything. If she disagreed, Pang Xiao would have the idea of placing Mu Jinghu by her side again. Pang Xiao would really have no one to rely on if they encountered any danger. It wasn't that he didn't trust Huzi, Xu Weiji, and the other Jinghu Wei, but which ordinary person could have such superb martial arts skills as Mu Jinghu? Qin Yining made preparations to set off in full swing. To outsiders, he only told them that he was going to buy a house. This news reached Zhong Ibor's residence. When Bian Ruohan heard the news, he couldn't help but sneer. He slammed an ivory comb on the table. Both of us are going to take up the position with our husbands. This madam hasn't thought of what to do yet, but that shameless little whore knows how to show off. Does it show that she knows a lot? Pay. She's just a cheap whore who has been toyed with by countless people. When Bian Ruohan scolded, none of the servant girls who served him dared to react. They all lowered their heads and tried their best to reduce their presence. That day, Madam entered the palace and caused concubine Zhuang to be scolded by your majesty. Later, they were called home by master to punish them severely. Their calves were still swollen from being whipped with rattan vines. They insisted that Madam had done something wrong and that they, as servants, didn't know how to console her. But they were just servants. They had no right to speak in front of Madam. What else could they do? Uncle. A servant girl's greeting came from outside the door. Then, the beaded curtain lifted and Lu Heng walked in quickly. An oil paper umbrella was placed outside the door. His soft boots were already wet from the rain. Uncle, you're back? It's raining outside. You didn't get wet, did you? Why didn't you ask them to follow you? Bien Ruohan touched the tasseled hairpin in his hair and quickly walked forward. Lu Heng didn't even bother to look at him. He only said, I've already instructed people to prepare the journey. You don't have to trouble yourself. Bien Ruohan's eyes lit up. Uncle. Many thanks for Uncle's understanding. This concubine is actually not tired. This concubine is very willing to help Uncle. What I mean is that you don't have to trouble yourself with preparing the journey. What? Bien Ruohan suddenly raised his voice. You actually don't plan on bringing me along? Lu Heng smiled. I'm going to take up an appointment. When the time comes, there will be too many things to do. I won't be able to take care of you. Moreover, if you go, you'll have to suffer along with me. You can stay in the capital with peace of mind and be filial to your parents. You don't go too far. Aren't my parents your father-in-law and mother-in-law? You're not even willing to call them that. Moreover, didn't your majesty say that we're newlyweds? Lu Heng waved his hand to stop Bien Ruohan's words. I think that we should maintain an appropriate distance so that we can maintain the novelty of each other. If we get to know each other too well, I'm afraid that we won't even have any fantasies. At the banquet, Bien Ruohan's face turned purple and his fists were tightly clenched. People like Lu Heng didn't even use vulgarities when they were in love. He was clearly mocking him, but every word he said pierced her heart. Bien Ruohan's tears streamed down. He grabbed Lu Heng's arm and pulled. Let's go. You're coming with me to the palace to see my cousin. What do you mean by humiliating me like this? You look down on the Bien family, but do you also look down on the imperial family? Don't forget that your majesty is my cousin-in-law. Lu Heng sneered and pulled his hand back. If I remember correctly, your sister hasn't taken the position of empress yet, right? Bien Ruohan was so angry that his whole body trembled. He burst into tears. I don't care. I must go to Huichuan County with you. What did I do wrong? I just went to scold that bitch, and then you ignored me like this. Not only did you not consummate the marriage with me, but you also humiliated me with all kinds of words. Even if I'm incompetent, it's not up to you to humiliate me. I'm going to tell your majesty. I'm going to tell the Empress Dowager. Lu Heng smiled. Just make a fuss. If you make a big fuss, I'll still be the one losing face. Bien Ruohan cried loudly. His tears smeared his makeup. He covered his face and ran out without caring about it. The wet nurse and servant girl hurriedly bowed and chased after him. When Lu Heng saw that he had gone far, he sat down on the soft couch by the window and rubbed his eyebrows tiredly. A husband with a virtuous wife would have fewer troubles. However, he didn't have that kind of luck. Ever since he married Madame Bien, he had lost all his face. Now, Your Majesty's attitude towards him was becoming more and more unpredictable. He was already busy with court matters, and Bien Ruohan still wanted to add to his troubles. In contrast, Qin Yining planned to go to Huichuan County to buy property in order to let Pang Xiao recuperate in peace. How could these two women be compared? He didn't know Your Majesty's intention of arranging for him to be the Huichuan County magistrate. In order to confirm, he would let Bien Ruohan make a fuss. Anyway, it was a woman's matter. Even if she offended the nobles in the palace, it was a problem with the Bien family's upbringing. It would be a good opportunity to see the palace's attitude. As for whether Bien Ruohan would be punished for crying casually, Chapter 923. Bien Ruohan was sent back by the palace servants before the hour of Shu. When Lu Heng learned that Eunuch Li from Xi'an Palace had come, he put on a straw raincoat and a rain hat and personally went to welcome him. Eunuch Li smiled and bowed to Lu Heng. "Count, this servant greets you." The Empress Dowager specifically ordered this servant to send Madam back. Now that she has safely arrived, this servant has completed his task. "You're too kind. It's so late and I still have to trouble Eunuch Li to make a trip. It's really hard on you." Lu Heng smiled and stepped forward. He naturally handed over a brocade pouch that was filled with golden sunflower seeds. Eunuch Li knew what was inside just by twisting and turning it. He smiled and put it into his arms. His attitude was more attentive and flattering. "How can you say this? This is this servant's duty. Zhong Ibo is too polite." "What are you talking about? It's so cold. I only invited Eunuch Li to drink wine to warm you up. Does the Empress Dowager have any orders?" Eunuch Li glanced at Bien Ruohan, who was silent and had his head lowered. He pulled Lu Heng to the side and said in a low voice, "The Empress Dowager was originally in a good mood today. The Empress Dowager is old and loves to see the younger generation live peacefully and happily. Zhong Ibo is a sensible person and should understand." When Lu Heng heard this, how could he not understand? The Empress Dowager was originally in a good mood. Therefore, Bien Ruohan must have stirred things up. The Empress Dowager loved to see the younger generation live peacefully and happily. She was tired of the newlyweds causing trouble in the palace. Therefore, he couldn't keep Bien Ruohan in the capital. He still had to take her with him when he took office. Otherwise, if the Empress Dowager heard about it, it wouldn't be peacefully and happily. The Empress Dowager's intention might be Your Majesty's intention. He couldn't ignore it. Lu Heng was annoyed in his heart, but on the surface, he was very grateful. He thanked him repeatedly. "Thank you for your advice, Eunuch Li. Hey, Count Bo is too polite. You are Your Majesty's right-hand man, and the Empress Dowager thinks highly of you. In the future, this servant will have to trouble Count Bo, whether big or small." Lu Heng had always known that Eunuch Li of Xi'an Palace was somewhat greedy for petty gains. Hearing this, he naturally understood that Eunuch Li intended to ask him for something in the future. Now, he would say it in advance. Lu Heng and Eunuch Li exchanged a few more pleasantries before personally escorting them out of the Lu residence with an umbrella. After returning to his room, Lu Heng stood beside the bed and looked at Bien Ruohan, who was lying on his side with his back facing him. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. His voice became gentle. "This time, it's all over the palace. Are you still angry?" Bien Ruohan suddenly sat up, hugging the blanket. She looked up at Lu Heng with grievance. Her tears fell again. Her voice was hoarse as she said, "I know you dislike me. I also know that I was wrong that day. But you always get angry at me because of that slut. I wasn't born to vent your anger for you. I already know that I shouldn't have caused trouble, but you still won't let it go. You're not willing to pay attention to me, causing me to be unable to raise my head at home." When Bien Ruohan said this, she couldn't help but burst into tears. Lu Heng rubbed the space between his brows. He put on a smile and walked to the bed to sit down. His large hand gently stroked her tear-stained cheeks. Still crying? Bien Ruohan forgot to cry. Her eyes were wide open as she looked at Lu Heng. This was the first time Lu Heng was so close to her. It was the first time he was willing to take the initiative to touch her skin. This man was the head of the Lu family, the current dynasty's Zhong Ibo. He was born so handsome. Just like her mother said, she was originally going to marry him to be his second wife. How could she expect this man to be as pure as ice and as pure as jade? Moreover, when a man was in his teens, he had to know the ways of the world. He had slept with many women. No matter how much he cheated, she was still the legitimate Madame Zhong Ibo. No one dared to change this. In any case, she was also a relative of the imperial family. She wasn't born bad. It was just that she was too arrogant and willful. Thinking of this, a pair of lotus arms took the initiative to wrap around Lu Heng. Bien Ruohan's cheeks flushed red. "Earl, This concubine knows that she was wrong. In the future, I won't cause trouble like this. I won't go to the palace to talk about our family matters, okay? Lu Heng smiled. His large hand reached into her lapel and kneaded. She blushed and whimpered. She took the initiative to offer her red lips, but he inadvertently avoided them. Your Majesty probably won't give him the right to be willful. Since things had already come to this point and couldn't be changed, he just needed to care about being harmonious and beautiful. Wang Fei, it has been raining for 4 or 5 days in a row. If it continues like this, won't it delay our journey? Ji Yun brought a bowl of hot tea to Qin Yining. Have some hot tea to warm your body. Qin Yining nodded. When his slightly cold fingers touched the warm teacup, the warmth rushed through his pores, making Qin Yining sigh comfortably. It's raining. It's not summer yet, but it feels like autumn. Let's take more warm clothes when we set off. Huichuan County is further north than here. I've brought everything for you. It's enough for you to wear on the road. If it's not enough, we can go to Huichuan County to buy some. At this moment, Pang Xiao came back. Zi Yuan and Han Xiao took Pang Xiao's umbrella and put it outside. Ji Yun and Bing Tang also served tea and left. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Have you discussed everything?" "Yes. The weather hasn't been good recently. Do you want to wait for the rain to stop before setting off?" Pang Xiao sat down beside Qin Yining, poured himself a cup of hot tea, and took a sip. Qin Yining shook his head. "Let's follow the original plan and set off the day after tomorrow. If it rains, we'll walk slower. Huichuan County is not far from the capital, so we'll arrive in half a month." Pang Xiao nodded. He was reluctant to let her go, but he had to let her go. The two of them were entangled with each other for 2 days. During these 2 days, the rain was still falling. Qin Yining set off. A lot of water had accumulated on the official road outside the city, and the road was very wet. Qin Yining lifted the curtain of the carriage and said with a smile, "You should go back quickly. We'll see each other soon. Don't worry, with Mr. Xie and so many Jinghu Wei around, I'll be fine." In the opposite carriage, Pang Xiao also lifted the curtain and looked at her. He was still ill, so he naturally couldn't ride out by himself. However, he felt really uncomfortable that he couldn't send Qin Yining off. "Well, while the time is still good, let's set off quickly. The situation on the road is uncertain in the rain, so don't miss the time to stay." Pang Xiao ordered Tang Xiu, who was accompanying Qin Yining. "Yes." Tang Xiu responded and turned to give an order. The carriage slowly set off. Qin Yining smiled and waved at Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao also smiled at Qin Yining. He leaned out half of his body and kept staring at Qin Yining. When the carriage gradually disappeared into the distance, he sat up helplessly and ordered, "Let's go back." Qin Yining's heart was empty when she suddenly parted with Pang Xiao. The two of them were too happy when they were together. When they suddenly separated, they felt that it was too quiet. However, no matter what she did now, it was for the sake of not being separated from Pang Xiao for the rest of her life. It was just a short separation, so it didn't matter much. Qin Yining's trip wasn't smooth because it was difficult to travel in the rain, and the wheels often sank into the mud. "I don't know what's wrong with the weather. Could it be that there's a leak? The rain has been falling for half a month, and it doesn't seem like it's going to stop. We haven't seen the sun for a long time. Yes, they say that spring rain is as precious as oil. However, if there's too much oil, won't the crops be damaged?" Bing Tang and Ji Yun were very worried. Ji Yun even said, "Ever since Your Majesty issued a decree to let Wang Yi go to Huichuan County to supervise the construction of the Imperial Mausoleum, the weather has been bad. Could it be that the heavens are also complaining about the injustice for our Wang Yi?" Qin Yining smiled. "All right, you're thinking too much. The rain is decided by the heavens. It's not something that humans can interfere with." Bing Tang and Ji Yun didn't think so. They knew better than anyone else how seriously Your Majesty suppressed Wang Yi and Wang Fei. Wang Yi had done so much for the imperial court, but he was gradually weakened to this extent. Wang Fei could only send her family and children away and fake her death to save her life. His Majesty's actions, not to mention others, even they, the servants, were bitterly disappointed. It was hard to say if the heavens didn't like the things your Majesty did and gave a warning. However, since Qin Yining didn't allow them to say anything, they put away their thoughts and didn't mention this matter. Just as Qin Yining's inconspicuous convoy slowly approached Huichuan County, in an ordinary person's house in Huichuan County, a man with a medium build, a dark complexion, and a mustache was pacing back and forth in the house with his hands behind his back. His robes and boots were stained with mud that hadn't dried yet. It was obvious that he had just returned from outside. He had messy footprints on the floor of the house. "Big brother, this Jew family doesn't know how to appreciate our kindness. We brothers have already used our family's skills in front of him, but he still doesn't give us any face," another taller middle-aged man said. "This Liu family's work is too unreliable," the man pacing in the middle of the house said. If Qin Yining was here, he would definitely be able to tell that he was Guan Dahu. This was because his hoarse voice was truly unforgettable. "We bought the county magistrate from the Liu family, but who would have thought that the old emperor would suddenly interfere and give us the title of county magistrate? Our county magistrate is definitely going to be replaced." "That's right. Wouldn't all our money have gone to waste?" "That's not a problem. The Liu family has a large business, so they won't go back on their word. However, we have already done everything we could to get the money to buy the official position. The Liu family won't be returning the money in the short term, so it won't be possible for us to buy another official position. We can only take advantage of the time before the new county magistrate and the imperial envoy arrive." Speaking to this point, Guan Dahu looked around. Other than Liu Ban, there were 4 other men in the house. They were all brothers from the Qingtian alliance who were willing to work with them. "There are only 6 of us. That thing is mixed in with a large amount of stone. Although I roughly know where it is, with the strength of the 6 of us, it is impossible for us to move it. It is harder than ascending to the heavens to steal it without alerting the government." Chapter 924. Everyone's blood boiled as they spoke. "Who in the Haifeng stockade wouldn't betray us?" A hothead stood out and asked. Guan Dahu laughed. "Of course I won't tell them what we're going to do. I'll just say that we're going to steal some stones from the imperial court. The Haifeng stockade has been in the underworld for many years, so they've naturally heard of the Qingtian alliance." "What does our Qingtian alliance do in the south?" Liu Ban said. "Of course we're going against the Dog Emperor." "Yes. That's why the Haifeng stockade probably thinks that we're going against the Emperor, so we're going to steal the stones from the Emperor's mausoleum to show off. After all, stealing the stones to build the mausoleum was the biggest challenge to the Emperor's authority." Guan Dahu said, "They're all Jianghu people. When the time comes, we'll just give them some money in the name of chivalry. They'll help us do this and are afraid of being beheaded, so they won't be stupid enough to reveal it themselves. Once the 6 of us get the money, we'll just run away. The world is so big, do you think the Emperor can catch us?" Hearing this, they couldn't help but feel excited. Since ancient times, wealth came from danger. They were only one step away from success. As long as they had the money to hire the Haifeng stockade people to move the stones, wouldn't that be enough? "Why don't we take another risk?" Liu Ban anxiously gestured with a fierce look in his eyes. Guan Dahu pursed his lips and thought, "Let's think of another way." When they went to Danju Prefecture's Liu family to buy an official position, they had to exterminate 2 large families to gather the money. For this money, their hands were stained with blood. Guan Dahu tapped his feet. "There are still 2 large families here. Let's use peaceful means before resorting to force. If they're willing to sponsor us, then it'll be good. If not, then we can only use that method." Liu Ban and the others nodded in agreement. Just as Guan Dahu said, unless it was absolutely necessary, no one was willing to kill people. Killing people wasn't a good experience. When Qin Yining and the others arrived at Huichuan County, it was the afternoon of the first day of the 5th month. Although it was still early in the morning, the lead grey clouds were pressing down on the top of their heads. The strong wind blew so hard that the car door was cracked open, and tiny raindrops drilled into the car. "Your Highness, this is really..." Fortunately, we are almost there. Yes. Qin Yining's dress was soaked by the rain. Halfway there, the car started to leak. The 10-day journey was even more torturous than when we went to Beijing. Bing Tang hurriedly covered Qin Yining from the rain and couldn't help complaining. Ji Yun smiled and said, "All right, look at you. You've been nagging the whole way. You're pouting so much that you can hang an oil bottle from your mouth. If Huzi sees you, won't he laugh at you?" Bing Tang's face immediately turned red. He straightened his neck and said, "Anyway, here's with Wang Yi. You, on the other hand, are drenched like a drowned rat. Imperial bodyguard Tang will laugh at you. You naughty girl." Ji Yun also blushed. Qin Yining stroked his hair that was soaked by the rain. When he saw the two girls teasing each other with red faces, he couldn't help but laugh. Tang Xiu, who was following closely outside the carriage, heard the conversation inside. Her face was so red that it could evaporate a layer of white mist from the rain. The group quickly entered the city. Because the journey was short, they thought that they would arrive soon, so they didn't order anyone to take the lead in advance. After the group asked around, they directly went to the largest inn in the area and booked the side courtyard that no one had rented before. "Your Highness, this servant has already told the innkeeper to prepare hot water. You should take a hot bath later. Our small courtyard has a small stove that can boil water. This servant will cook some ginger soup later. Let's all have some," Bing Tang said. Qin Yining nodded. "You should quickly change into dry clothes first. It won't be too late to go later." "Okay. I'll have to trouble you to prepare some more. Sir Xie is old, and the imperial bodyguards have been drenched by the rain along the way. Everyone should eat some." "Got it." Bing Tang nodded with a smile. She and Ji Yun first helped Qin Yining change his clothes. When Zi Yuan and Han Xiao came back after changing their clothes, they went out to tidy up. Qin Yining took the hot tea brought by Han Xiao and held it with both hands. The weather in May had become cold because of the continuous rain. Qin Yining walked to the window and opened a gap in the lattice to look into the courtyard. There were 3 main rooms, 2 side rooms, and a row of inverted seats in the courtyard. Only the middle part of the courtyard was paved with stone bricks in the shape of a cross. The rest of the courtyard was covered with dirt, and it was now muddy from the rain. Looking up, the sky was dark, as if it would press down at any time. From the capital to Huichuan County, it had been raining for more than 10 days. He didn't know how many places had been affected by the heavy rain. Qin Yining wanted to go back and look for the court bulletin to take a look. After settling down, Qin Yining asked Bing Tang to check Xie Yu's pulse to make sure that the old lady didn't catch a cold. Xie Yu was very grateful for Qin Yining's meticulousness. "Tang girl, go back and thank the princess for this old man." "Yes." Bing Tang smiled and put away the pulse pillow. "Then," she said with a smile, "the princess asked me to tell Sir Xie that it's been raining for a long time. It's not normal. The princess wants to look at the court bulletin to see if anything major has happened. The princess and this old man have the same idea." "Tomorrow morning, I'll go and find out what's going on. Oh, then I'll have to trouble Sir Xie. It's no big deal. It's my duty." Bing Tang went back and told Qin Yining. It was a quiet night. The next day, Qin Yining saw Xie Yu and didn't intend to go out for the time being. She had to understand the local situation before she went to see the people from Sitong. When Xie Yu came back, she brought back a piece of shocking news. "Princess, things aren't good. The rain doesn't just fall on the roads to the capital and Huichuan County. There are different degrees of heavy rain everywhere, especially in the south. With the old capital of Dian as the center, the rain is very heavy." Qin Yining frowned when he heard this. "I'm afraid that the imperial court isn't rich anymore. The world isn't peaceful. After all these years of fighting in the east and west, Biji's treasury has probably been emptied. Even the imperial mausoleum has been repaired and stopped. If there's a flood now, the national treasury will be even more burdened." The national treasury had been short on money for a long time. Otherwise, Li Chitian wouldn't have been so focused on the Dian treasure to solve this urgent problem. If they wanted to increase their income and reduce their expenditure, They had to think of a way and have time to implement it. If there was a flood in the south, Qin Yining couldn't imagine what the Daeju dynasty would be like and what Li Chitian would come up with to solve this urgent problem. Xie Yu and Qin Yining fell into deep thought. I'm afraid that the national treasury won't be able to support the construction of the imperial mausoleum. When the time comes, will your majesty blame Wang Yi for it? Qin Yining nodded worriedly. I'm also worried about this. Li Chitian was thinking of ways to weaken Pang Xiao and take the opportunity to impeach Pang Xiao. If Li Chitian really had a chance on this matter, he would definitely think of ways to kill Pang Xiao. The two were silent for a long time. Qin Yining smiled and said, "The flood isn't something that you and I can control. We can only deal with it as it comes. The most important thing is to solve the problem at hand." Xie Yu smiled and nodded. Wang Fei's thoughts are clear. This is good. At the beginning, he had been worried that Qin Yining would be impulsive and spend too much effort on things that they couldn't control. Now it seemed that he had worried too much. It seemed that he had made the mistake of underestimating women. This couldn't happen again in the future. Qin Yining and Xie Yu discussed what to do in the future. After they sorted out the plan, they each went back to rest. When they woke up the next day, the sky was still dark. Even though the rain had stopped, it looked like there would be another heavy rain soon. After eating breakfast, Qin Yining asked, "Where is Sir Xie?" Sir Xie took 2 Jinghu Wei servants and left. He said that he was going to find a house. Ji Yun said with a smile. Qin Yining nodded and said, "Then today, let's go to Sai Tong Number to take a look." Ji Yun and Bing Tang went out to prepare. Most of the roads in the city were not paved with stone, so the roads were very muddy. When Qin Yining and the others passed by the gates of Sai Tong Number, Qin Yining ordered, "Keep going." The Jinghu Wei who was driving the carriage immediately obeyed and continued forward. When they passed the street corner, he asked, "Wang Fei, we're not going to Sai Tong Number." Qin Yining said, "We'll stop at an inconspicuous place in the back. You stay here and guard. I'll only take 2 servant girls. This way, we won't attract too much attention." "Yes." Jinghu Wei said with a smile, "You're so considerate." If it wasn't for Wang Fei's reminder, he probably would have directly driven the carriage there. Wouldn't that be too eye-catching? Qin Yining arranged everything and brought people to the side door of Sai Tong Number. He handed the maple leaf-shaped jade tablet that Qiu Feishan gave him to Ji Yun. "Go knock on the door and ask to see them." "Okay." Ji Yun wore wooden clogs outside her embroidered shoes and held an oil paper umbrella. She lightly walked over a puddle of water and knocked on the side door. Not long after, a waiter came to answer the door. When he saw that it was a pretty servant girl with a romantic appearance, looking at her clothes and aura, he knew that she was not a local. The waiter smiled and said, "Oh, an honored guest has come. Do you have any orders?" Ji Yun smiled and shook the maple leaf-shaped jade tablet, saying, "Is the person in charge here?" When the waiter saw the character Qiu on the green jade maple leaf, he immediately straightened his expression and bowed, saying, "Yes, yes. Please wait a moment, this little one will immediately pass on the message." Ji Yun smiled and nodded, standing under the porch and waiting. Bing Tang and Qin Yining shared a large oil paper umbrella and couldn't help but whisper, "It's raining again. Although it's not very heavy, it's really annoying to keep raining like this." "That's right." Qin Yining worriedly stretched her white jade-like fingers out of the umbrella. Raindrops fell on her fingertips from time to time, causing her to be so cold that she hurriedly retracted her hand. Chapter 925. Ji Yun smiled and avoided his greeting, quickly returning the greeting respectfully. This servant didn't make it clear. "That person is this servant's master." "Oh." Ji Yun turned and supported Qin Yining to the side door. The shopkeeper also saw Qin Yining's appearance and remembered the description of a fairy-like young woman in the letter from the boss some time ago. He suddenly realized and bowed respectfully, then lowered his voice and asked, "Are you Prince Zhongxian's consort?" Qin Yining raised his eyebrows. "You recognize me?" No, this servant has never met you before." It's just that in the letter from the boss a few days ago, he mentioned that Prince Zhengxian's consort would be arriving soon. He also instructed this servant to listen to all your orders. This servant's surname is Yin, and my name is Wu Ji. In the future, this servant will do his best to carry out your orders. Shopkeeper Yin is too polite. Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh at Qiu Feishan's intelligence and arrangements. It seemed that she still cared about Pang Xiao's matter. Mu Jinghu and Pang Xiao were now in the same boat. For the sake of Mu Jinghu, Qiu Feishan wouldn't ignore Pang Xiao's troubles, right? However, Qiu Feishan had arranged everything properly, saving her a lot of effort. Shopkeeper Yin respectfully invited Qin Yining in, and the group walked along the corridor to the main hall of the back residence. Please take a seat. Please take a seat too. The two sides politely took their seats according to their statuses. Qin Yining smiled and asked, has everything been going well these days? If it wasn't for Qiu Feishan's instructions, Shopkeeper Yin would only think that Qin Yining, an outsider, was meddling too much. But thinking about Qin Yining's identity and Qiu Feishan's attitude, Shopkeeper Yin concluded that Qiu Feishan must have sided with Wang Yi. In the future, with Prince Zhengxian as a big tree, Sai Tong shop would be able to do things more smoothly. How could ordinary people like them have the chance to come into contact with high officials and nobles? Now that they had established this relationship, it would only be beneficial to them in the future. Therefore, the opportunity to talk to Qin Yining was extremely rare for him. Your Highness. Shopkeeper Yin said respectfully, thanks to you and Wang Yi, the 4 Access branch has been doing quite well recently. The local branch has also been developing smoothly. Although our business can't compare to the bigger cities, it's still doing quite well. That's good. Qin Yining smiled and said, Wang Yi will be coming here to take office soon. Our family will probably be staying in Huichuan County for a long time. I'm afraid we'll have to trouble Shopkeeper Yin to take care of us then. What are you talking about? Just give me your orders. I don't deserve such courtesy. Shopkeeper Yin saw that Qin Yining was polite and didn't have the slightest arrogance of a superior, so he couldn't help but feel comfortable. However, the princess consort was particular about etiquette. He wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could accept such courtesy with a clear conscience. Shopkeeper Yin stood up and bowed in fear and trepidation, saying, Princess consort and Wang Yi, if you need anything in the future, just give me your orders. I'll do my best and won't hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. At this moment, a thought flashed through Shopkeeper Yin's mind and he suddenly said, Princess consort, there's actually a difficult matter these days. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and asked, what is it? Shopkeeper Yin pondered for a moment and said, it's like this. Recently, Huichuan County hasn't been peaceful. I don't know where a group of heroes from the pugilistic world came from. Recently, they've been visiting the big families in Huichuan County and the surrounding area. After visiting, they used the excuse that they lack capital to do business to borrow money from the big families. You also know that they're obviously asking for money. There's no way they'll return the money. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He immediately thought of Guan Dahu and his group. What kind of people are they? How many people are there? How do they do things? Shopkeeper Yin secretly sighed in relief when he saw that Qin Yining was asking in detail and didn't intend to be perfunctory. He hurriedly said, there are about 5 or 6 people in that group. They haven't come to our house yet, and the number of people they send each time varies. That's about it. It's just that these heroes are all skilled in martial arts. When they arrive at a big family's house, they pay particular attention to peaceful means before resorting to force. This means that they need money to do business, so they'll start using their martial arts on the spot. Then, they'll pester and ask for money. Most big families don't want to get involved with such troublesome people. They all think that it's better to avoid unnecessary trouble, so they'll all give them money. There are even some who give them 10 taels or dozens of taels. However, this group of people doesn't seem to be satisfied. If the reward isn't what they want, they'll return it to them. Qin Yining nodded and said, so you're worried that they'll come to Four-Way Shop to ask for money? Shopkeeper Yin nodded and sighed, that's right. You also know that our four-way shop attracts a lot of attention. I'm afraid that even dozens of taels won't be enough to get rid of these people. I'm afraid that it'll attract trouble. At this point, shopkeeper Yin smiled a little bashfully. Wang Yi must have a lot of personal guards by his side. If something really happens, I'll have to trouble the princess consort to take care of them. Qin Yining smiled and nodded, of course. With my relationship with Boss Chiu, I'll naturally have to take care of four-way shop when she's not around. Shopkeeper Yin suddenly felt a sense of superiority, as if he was leaning against a big tree for shade. He smiled and said, "Thank you, princess consort." The two of them chatted happily for a while. Suddenly, a waiter in front of them came to reply. He spoke so quickly that he sounded like he was pouring beans. "Shopkeeper Yin, there are a few people in front of us. They didn't mention what kind of business they were doing, nor did they come to buy anything. They're here to see you." Looking at them, why do they look like those heroes who recently became famous in Huichuan County? The waiter's expression was a little panicked. After all, they were all ordinary businessmen who only wanted to make a living peacefully. They really didn't want to get into trouble. Shopkeeper Yin looked at Qin Yining, "Princess consort, what do you think?" Qin Yining thought for a moment and said, "Go meet them and see what they want. Learn from the other big families in the area and give them 10 taels first. It's fine if you can get them to accept it. If they don't agree, then come and ask me again." "Yes." Shopkeeper Yin hurriedly agreed. With Qin Yining's instructions, he had a backbone and quickened his pace as he walked forward. Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Ji Yun stayed in the main room of the back residence to drink tea and wait for news from the front. After about the time it took for 2 sticks of incense to burn, shopkeeper Yin finally came back wiping his sweat. "Princess consort, this humble one gave them 50 taels, but they still weren't satisfied and said that they wanted to do a big business. If they could get investment, then they could become a shareholder. This humble one said that I was only a small shopkeeper and couldn't make the decision. They then began to pester endlessly and insisted on meeting the owner of Sai Tong shop. They even said that Sai Tong shop was a big business and didn't want their business to be ruined." Sweat slid down his forehead again, and shopkeeper Yin hurriedly wiped it off with the back of his hand. "Princess consort, what do you think we should do about this situation?" Qin Yining propped up his chin and thought for a moment before asking, "What did those people look like? Did the person leading them have a very hoarse voice when he spoke?" "That's right. Does princess consort know him?" Shopkeeper Yin was a little surprised and couldn't help but ask. Then, he regretted his quick mouth and tried to salvage the situation. "This humble one didn't mean anything else. I was just surprised." "I understand." Qin Yining smiled. Shopkeeper Yin said, "There were 5 people who came, and all of them were tall and strong. The person leading them was dressed like a scholar and had a very hoarse voice. His eyes were very sharp and made people feel uncomfortable just by looking at him." Qin Yining couldn't help but stand up and pace thoughtfully. It seemed that Guan Dahu and the others were in a hurry to gather the money. What were they in a hurry to get the money for? The money he spent to buy the official position from the Liu family was equivalent to going down the drain. He also didn't know when Liu Zhang would get a refund. Now that they were in a hurry to get the money, it must have something to do with the treasure. Qin Yining thought about it and could only conclude that Guan Dahu wanted to gather the money to hire people to rob the stone. If that was the case, then they were asking for a lot of money. After all, the stone used to build the imperial mausoleum, even if it was just stone, if someone dared to steal it and was caught by the imperial court, they would be sentenced to death. If they wanted to hire people to do such a dangerous thing, they naturally had to spend a lot of money. Otherwise, who would dare to risk their lives with them? After thinking through this key point, Qin Yining gradually formed a plan in his mind. Shopkeeper Yin saw that Qin Yining didn't say anything and asked hesitantly, "Princess consort, what do you think about this?" Qin Yining thought about it and said, "I already have a plan for this. Go and tell them to come here tomorrow at this time and say that Boss Chiu of the four-way shop wants to see them in person." "Princess consort? Boss Chiu, she?" Qin Yining smiled and said, "Just say that. I have my own plans. If they still don't want to leave, just tell them that our four-way shop has business all over the place and the shops won't run away on their own. If they want to do business and invest, they will naturally need a large amount of money to negotiate with the owners. You are only a shopkeeper, so the amount of money you have in your hands is limited. Shopkeeper Yin was stunned when he heard this. He didn't expect Princess Consort to be such a flawless person when it came to lying. However, since the owners said in the letter that they would listen to Princess Consort's orders, Shopkeeper Yin was naturally happy that he didn't have to do anything. He immediately nodded and went out to deal with them. Not long after, Shopkeeper Yin came back looking refreshed and said, "Princess Consort, they left and said that they would come back tomorrow." Qin Yining turned around and instructed Ji Yun, "Go out quietly and have Tang Xiu carefully observe the surroundings to see if there are any eyes. We will go back when the eyes are gone." "Yes." Ji Yun nodded and picked up the oil paper umbrella that was standing by the wall. She went to the porch and put on her wooden clogs before quickly walking out. Shopkeeper Yin was stunned. "Princess Consort, are you worried that those heroes haven't left yet?" Qin Yining nodded and said, "There's nothing wrong with being cautious." Shopkeeper Yin felt cold sweat break out on his forehead. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.